Our Grenadian people are proudly Caribbean, and we continually strengthen the bonds of the people of the region. Together, we embrace our collective destiny.
We are the children of Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley, Vivian Richards and David Runner.
As Caribbean as West Indies cricket, as Caribbean as the University of the West Indies.
We are reggae, we are soca, we are one vibration.
Break the chain of colonialism.
Break the chains of colonialism.
The Caribbean Court of Justice. Proudly ours.
The Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts present Youth Week 2018, empowering our youth, shaping our community, protecting our future. The week of activities kicks off on Friday, November 9th with the Minister's Address from 8 p.m. Saturday, 10th November, Health Fair, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Cuthbert Peters Park, War, and the Fitness Revolution, 3 p.m. Concord Junction. Sunday, 11th November, it's the Peace Concert, Grenville Bus Terminal. On Tuesday, 13th November, ministers meet with the youth at Her Majesty's Prison. Thursday, 15th November from 5 p.m. It's the Imani Graduation, Youth Awards and Gala. And on Friday, 16th through the weekend, it's the National Youth Service Weekend. Every parish get involved. And on Saturday, 17th November, it's Youth Expo, Explosion Fashion and Cultural Day. 2 p.m. until at Hero Square, Victoria in St. Mark. So remember, Youth Week 2018, November 9th to the 17th. Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new National Party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.
The NDC and I not opposed to the CCJ.
You know, we should have been the first one signing on to the CCJ. We should have been. I don't know what happened, but given what we did then, we should have been the first. So keep that in the back of your minds with those of you who have all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't do it.
I'm convinced that the CCJ is better for this region than the Privy Council at this point in time. And I am saying it will be better for many, many years to come. So I am simply asking of you to vote yes for the CCJ.
The National Democratic Congress is not and has never been opposed to the CCJ. In fact, previous administrations led by the NDC have done lots of work to push forward the work of the CCJ, and that can be attested to by Brother Peter David. The CCJ is another step towards the achievement of Caribbean unity. And in the NDC, we know that eventually, one way or the other, the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction will become a reality, not only in Grenada, but throughout the Caribbean.
Doesn't matter what you see now, I can see His glory. Woo! Everybody shout, oh, 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 oh. I know lift your voice, shout.
The Caribbean Court of Justice, reaching one unity, coming together as one. Hear what we say. When you see November 6th, we voting yes for the CCJ. Come out and make the right decision. It benefits in everybody. The Caribbean Court of Justice is what I come to promote. So when not
And good morning to Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Once again, it is time for Hard Talk. My name is Sheldon Scott.
And I'm Devon Romain.
I find we ain't getting Devon Romain there, man. Let me see. Yeah. Something I hit to know. Yeah. Yeah, Devon, are you here again there?
Good morning.
Yeah, something I ain't getting there. Let me just check one thing and we'll be right back.
How you mean? Warm to you like that. Grenada. Don't stand up, babe. We have to vote for CCJ. Don't stand up, babe. CCJ going all the way. Just look at this. Our own Caribbean Court of Justice. Yes, that good for we. Now we have to spend less money. I take a vote. You take a vote. We take a vote. Vote for Caribbean Justice. He take a vote. She take a vote. They take a vote. Vote for Caribbean Justice. Listen to this. I can't wait for November 6th. We voting yes for the Caribbean Court of Justice. Serious business. Time we come together as one. What? One final court of appeal in the Caribbean. Take a vote. You take a vote. We take a vote.
Yeah, we taking our vote tomorrow. Let me hear you now, Devon.
Good morning.
I've signed. I still barely hearing you, but we gotta share our mic today. Yep. All right. Yes, folks, we're live on 97.5 City Sound FM, 89.5 CRFM, broadcasting out of beautiful Montjaloux. Yes, and also 92.9 Sister Al's FM out there in Carriacou, and 94.9 out there in Brooklyn. I think it might have a station in North Carolina is bringing us as well. Also, we are live via, we are in Grenada, yes, Grenada. CCJ, yes, Grenada. We on that page too. We shared there. Yeah, so we shared there. We're on the Hard Talk Grenada live page. We are on YouTube on Hard Talk Grenada and also on the www.hardtalkgrenada.com page. All right? No, that's not a page. That's a site. You could go there and you'll get different things. So we're talking Caribbean Court of Justice here, the topical issue. Tomorrow, less than 24 hours from now, you will be having the opportunity to cast your ballot as to whether or not we will be retaining the Caribbean Court of Justice, making the Caribbean Court of Justice our final court of appeal, or retaining the Privy Council. That is the issue. That's what's up there for discussion. That is what we'll be voting on tomorrow. We do have in studio with us two very learned individuals. And first of all, we have Dr. Francis Alexis, no stranger to Hard Talk Studios, no stranger to anybody in Grenada who has been listening to the issues over the past few weeks. Doc, this is your how much program for the morning?
This is only my second. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yes,
Look forward to that.
Yes, indeed. And also we have in studio with us Mrs. Michelle Steele. And good morning to you, ma'am. Also no stranger to Hard Talk. This is about your third, fourth, fifth time inside Hard Talk Studios?
Yes. All on the CCJ. Good morning, Sheldon.
All right.
And good morning to your listeners. It's great to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. How have things been going over the past few days? We know that you've been having some serious discussions on the issue of the Caribbean Court of Justice. How have things been going for the past few days?
Let's put things in perspective. Today is the day before we vote in the referendum as to whether we get out of the Privy Council into the CCJ. Teachers effectively are on strike. The day before Grenada became independent in 1974, workers were out on strike. Workers at the time, including the leader of the opposition, they were saying that Grenada is too small and too poor to become independent by itself. Grenada being then the first Eastern Caribbean country to embark upon independence. 44 years later today, all the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique are proud to celebrate our 44th independence anniversary, and we have no doubt about our ability to sustain ourselves as an independent people. 44 years down the road from today, if the voting goes right tomorrow, our grandchildren or great-grandchildren will be looking back and saying that was a great day on the 6th of November 2018 when our forefathers voted to take us on a path to final independence. That's the historical perspective we must bear in mind, and we must bear steadfastly in mind it's not a simple thing. We are talking about a date with history.
Indeed. And I think I was hearing this morning, just 2 days after we're celebrating the birth of T.A. Marichaud. On Wednesday, I believe, is his birthday, T.A. Marichaud's birthday. So with that said as well, another regional father of integration, the father of federation. So it would be a good birthday present to T.A. Marichaud.
Well, you know, all the great leaders of Grenada, all the great figures of Grenada, you go back to Julien Fedon. Julien Fedon was obviously an integrationist, a regionalist, because when he led the revolt of the French against the British in this country, we know not what became of him. So he must have found a safe haven somewhere in the Caribbean, which testifies to the links he must have had across the Caribbean as a regionalist. So too was, of course, T.A. Marichaud, regionalist par excellence. Eric Gary, in his own way, he was a regionalist. You heard more from Eric Gary on regionalism than you heard from many of his opponents at the time. And you come down to Morris Bishop as a symbol of building regionalism outside anybody else's backyard and asserting yourself as an independent region in the hemisphere. So the history of Grenada really is the history of regionalism. I remember that Hudson Austin, speaking in the trial, the Morris Bishop murder trial, was making the point time and again for auditors was that he was saying Grenada is the only country, certainly in the Eastern Caribbean, which has never gotten itself involved in, if I may use a neutral term, causing difficulties with other countries. So at every stage of our history, you can see leaders of different qualities and kinds being cognizant of the fact that we have in Grenada a common destiny with our brothers and sisters across the hemisphere.
So Grenada has traditionally never been one of the ones that kind of get involved in what it's not supposed to get involved in. We usually get involved in good things, what we should get involved in. Be it Sir Eric Matthew Gary taking us into independence and further into CARICOM and the United Nations and so on and so forth, or T.A. Marichaud taking us into a federation.
And along the way we have reaped benefits for that, because when we had our difficulties here in October, our friends across the region felt it for us and they responded in ways that they considered best suited to assist us here in Grenada in their own ways. You may have differences of views as to the ways chosen, but the fact of the matter is that they heard what we were saying and they responded in the ways that they saw could help us. And I dare say, according to our national historian George Brizan, did indeed help us.
Yes, indeed. You know, considering this, I was saying over the weekend that in my view, I think I know how Maurice Bishop would have voted had he been alive tomorrow. Had T.A. Marichaud been alive, I believe I know how he would have voted tomorrow.
You can't have any doubt about Maurice Bishop. The revolution took Grenada out of the Privy Council. In those days, there was no CCJ to take it into. But the example is there, and that is why when this current round of exercises started, you had the NDC public relations officer making the point at the Trade Center that given our history, Grenada should have been the first to get out of the Privy Council and be in the Caribbean Court of Justice. He was reading from the Bible written by the revolution, which is get out of the Privy Council.
Yeah, and we know that Sir Eric Matthew Gary, not only did he take us, start the process of independence and bringing us into independence, but he also brought us into various other regional and international organizations as well, sort of promoting and showing that independence as a people, that we can do this on our own and we can make our own friends, we can make our own decisions. T. Albert Marichaud, being the one that brought us into federation, and the father of federation, the father of we as a Caribbean people can't do it for ourselves. And I can't see how the children and those who say that they are progressive thinking and those who say that they love these individuals or that they respect these individuals, 44 and some years after independence, can say that come tomorrow they're going to vote against it. I honestly can't see that. Mrs. Steele, let me just get the mic a little closer to you there.
Yes, yes.
You have been moving around the island, been speaking a lot about the Caribbean Court of Justice. And so what has been your field thus far? What have you been picking up from the interactions that you've been having? I know you had several interactions with business places, with the RGPF, with different groups and organizations. What have been some of the feedback that you've been getting in relation to this issue?
Well, I must say that the feedback has been varied. However, I think that the real strong thread coming through when you have these face-to-face interactions is there is a support for the CCG. There is a sense of pride with our people. There's a sense of wanting that final independence. There is that recognition of our history. The comments that would have been made by Dr. Alexis and yourself earlier brings to mind, for example, two things. One would have been that wonderful song that Wizard has created for us, Black Wizard, where it is so well researched. And he speaks about T.A. Marichaud and Gary and other Caribbean leaders that would say that, you know, they would be proud to say CCJ all the way. And really all we are doing is taking on the baton and of these leaders, these heroes of Grenada and of the Caribbean, to take our country, our people, into that final court of appeal, and to really allow us to be recognized on that stage as having our own appellate court. Some people, when they look at or international organizations, when you look at your development or your state of development, your ranking in the world, part of it is having this final court and having a justice system that is completely independent. Mm-hmm. So these are all good things, and the feedback has been very good. We were engaged in Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and in particular, these islands or these people were so well informed and so well researched that we felt very, very confident of the sort of vote that they were going to put forward in the referendum. And so it's something that we need to not recognize and not forget. There is an article by David Comijong, whose father is Grenadian, and he is a lawyer out of Barbados, and it's called "Will the Island of Heroes Deliver a Heroic Vote for the CCJ on November 6th?" And he speaks, just as we have just spoken, about Julian Fedon and his lieutenants Stanislaus Besson and Etienne Ventor and Joaquin Philippe, who in the 1790s fought the British colonizers to a standstill and succeeded in destroying the British colonial and slavery regime. Contemplate the fact that from the very beginning of the 20th century, a succession of heroic Grenadians have been in the vanguard of the Caribbean struggle to extricate our region from the tentacles of British colonialism and to establish not only an independent Grenadian nation, but an autonomous, integrated Caribbean civilization. So this goes to the root of us as a people developing as a civilization. And I think people need to understand, I say this is our moment of reckoning, our moment of history. We did not live in the time of these heroes. Let us also join the ranks of the heroes, or join the heroes in their fight.
And for those of you that are viewing online, you'd realize we've just been joined by Mr. Robert Branch. Good morning to you, Mr. Branch. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here on your program. My apologies for being late. I had to go into office.
Yeah, Dr. Alexis will give some demerits for that one. Doesn't happen to be one of your students, right, Dr. Alexis?
It's been so long
indirectly,
ago.
I'll tell you this, I don't think you're going to go to law school and to the University of the West Indies without being influenced by Dr. Alexis. I'm sure this is still attest to that, because when you're doing administrative law and constitutional law, all of the required readings in terms of articles and books, etc., is Dr. Alexis. So he reigns supreme with regard to constitutional law and administrative law within the Caribbean anyway.
Sometimes regionally, locally, we doesn't realize what we have. Sometimes locally we don't.
He's in fact in charge, I think he still is, of the master's program at the University of the West Indies.
Wonderful.
So you feel very proud as a student, to have such persons from Grenada when you go to law school in the region.
Wonderful. We're heading down, final few hours before we go to the referendum vote. Doctor, let me flip it back over to you. What areas of concern have been some of the, over the last basically 48 hours, we've been seeing all sorts of scurrilous things being put out. What are some of the main areas of concern that have been raised with you over the past few weeks and months in your discussions going around? I know there's the traveling circus of no that pops up everywhere that there's a forum. That's what I refer to them as. The traveling circus of no that you would respond to. And you would hear the responses. I've heard Mr. Branch, I've heard Mrs. Steele, I've heard yourself respond to them. And yet still, over the past few hours, we've seen these individuals putting out these bits and pieces of information as though they're truthful once again. For instance, there's that one that they're putting out now, and it has influenced some individuals, that is saying that the entire process is allowing government to make whatever changes it wants to the Constitution. That what people are being asked for is on a bill to allow government to make whatever changes it wants to the Constitution, not just the CCJ, but whatever other changes. How do you respond to that? I imagine one of these individuals is actually a lawyer that has been saying this. Actually a lawyer. I don't know if it could be bad person, but anyhow, the song like that, the wrong body, body at maybe somewhere down in Grants with your alcoholic drinks. Anyhow.
There are to be two responses to that. First, you have to identify what the bill contains. That's the first thing. So if you don't mind, I would like to walk you through the bill. It's not going to take very long to exhaust a study of the bill so everybody can see, hear, and understand what the bill is doing. Clause 1 is the short title to the bill. It tells you how you may refer to the bill: Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Court of Justice, renaming of Supreme Court, Amendment Bill 2018. That's all it says in Clause 1. Clause 2 is an interpretation section. It is interpreting phrases, words such as the phrase Caribbean Court of Justice, and identifying that institution as the institution established by the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice, signed 2001 Barbados. We could step back even to the long title, which is telling you what the bill intends to do, namely, essentially, to have Grenada accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the CCJ and to rename our Supreme Court as the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. Now, I can go all the way down to Clause 13 to make a very important point. You see this Clause 13 in the bill? It is referred to as a sweeping up clause. And what this Clause 13 is saying is that, essentially, if in any written law, other than the provisions referred to specifically in the bill, you see any reference to Her Majesty in Council, Privy Council, or by whatever other name the Privy Council goes, in any such written provision, delete the phrase the Privy Council and substitute the phrase the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, we could have used just this clause alone as the entire bill. We could have had a one-clause bill saying, people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, wherever you see in any written law in force in Grenada any reference to the Privy Council, by whatever name called, delete that reference and put in its place the Caribbean Court of Justice. And that would have been adequate. That would have been sufficient. Now let me just explain this. When the British came to Grenada in 1763, or came to the Caribbean in St. Kitts in 1623-25, they brought with them the Privy Council, a body called Her Majesty in Council. The council was a body which is advising His Majesty, Her Majesty on different things. It had different committees. One of the committees was literally concerned with trade. And really it was the predecessor to the Board of Trade. So that up to today in the United Kingdom, you will see references to the Board of Trade, which is concerned with promoting trade. Now, the origins then of the Privy Council in relation to the colonies was this Board of Trade. And that is why up to now, the Privy Council almost always refers to itself as the Board. Hardly ever refers to itself as the Privy Council. They always say the Board will advise Her Majesty to allow the appeal or not to allow the appeal. So that was making the point. The Privy Council goes by different names, but the preference of the Privy Council is the Board. You never see them calling themselves the Privy Council, always the Board. Now, that sweep-up clause, clause 13 in the bill, would have been adequate for the entire bill as far as it relates to going into the CCJ. However, for elegance and completeness and comprehensiveness, the bill goes through the Constitution line by line, and wherever the words Her Majesty in Council appear, the bill is saying delete those words and put instead the words the Caribbean Court of Justice. For example, let's go to Clause 3 of the bill. Clause 3 of the bill is referring to Section 16, subsection 4 of the Constitution. Subsection 4 is talking about references, say, from the Magistrate Court to the High Court, onward to the Court of Appeal, onward to Her Majesty in Council. So if somebody, for example, being prosecuted in the Magistrate's Court were to say, the law under which you're prosecuting me is unconstitutional, it is denying me my freedom of expression, for example. That's a reference. And the reference could reach up to the Her Majesty in Council. So Clause 3 of the bill is telling you when you go to Section 16, subsection 4 of the bill, you will see there a reference to Her Majesty in Council. Strike it out and substitute the Caribbean Court of Justice. And that is what it does with all the sections of the Constitution. For example, Clause 4 of the bill, it's identifying Section 18(1) of the Constitution, which is defining the word court to include Her Majesty in Council. And Clause 4 of the bill is saying, when you get to Section 18, subsection 1 of the bill, you will see there a reference to Her Majesty in Council. Delete that phrase and substitute instead the Caribbean Court of Justice. And that is what it does going through the entirety of the Constitution, wherever in the Constitution. 39, 71, 102, and I'll spend a little time on 104. But remember, Sheldon, if we needed, we could have had a one-clause bill in the nature of Clause 13, simply saying that wherever in any written law in relation to Grenada, Caracupiti Martinique, you see a reference to Her Majesty in Council, delete it and substitute Caribbean Court of Justice. Now let me spend a little time on Clause 9 of the bill. It's referring to Section 104 of the Constitution. Now, Section 104 is the engine room of appeals to the Privy Council. This is the section which tells you the circumstances in which you can appeal as of right by yourself or with permission of the Court of Appeal of Grenada or with permission of Her Majesty in Council. So, Clause 9 of the bill is telling you, delete Section 104 of the Constitution entirely and put in a new section which really is simply removing all references to Her Majesty in Council and putting in their place references to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, look at this, Sheldon. In that exercise relating to Section 104 of the Constitution, there is a clause in Section 104 which is saying that if you are appealing to the Privy Council on an ordinary civil matter, you move my boundary pole, or you defame me in the newspaper, ordinary civil matter, the value of the claim has to be not less than $1,500. That's all. But we are retaining that in the new Section 104.
But let me put a hold there, because Devon, I think you've heard this as well. We are hearing attorney at law. Do we call him attorney at law? Do we say attorney at law? Attorney at law Claudette Joseph is saying that that is not so. She's saying that previously you paid $1,500, but now you're going to pay $15,000. And she has put this on social media, and she didn't post it as somebody else. She posted it as herself. Claudette Joseph. She's telling the Grenadian people.
She's wrong about that. Let me prove that to you. She is referring to paragraph 2 of Article 25 of the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice. That has a threshold value of $25,000. But you have to read the whole article as an entirety. So you have to start in the beginning, and the beginning is paragraph 1. And this is what paragraph 1 of Article 25 of the CCJ agreement says. In the exercise of its appellate jurisdiction, the court is a superior court of record with such jurisdiction and powers as are conferred on it by this agreement. And this agreement relates to $25,000. It goes on to say, by this agreement or by the Constitution or any other law of a contracting party. In other words, it may be $25,000 by the agreement. It may be a different figure by the Constitution. It may be a different figure by another law of a contracting party. Now let's test it. We're testing it with reference to what threshold agreement has been set by the other countries which are in the appellate jurisdiction of the court. So we're not doing it theoretically now. We're looking to see what threshold agreement has been set by other countries. Let's go back to the beginning. We start with Barbados. What is their threshold agreement? $18,250 Barbados dollars, not 25,000 EC dollars. We go next to Guyana. What is the Guyana threshold agreement? 1 million Guyanese dollars, not 25,000 EC dollars.
And even if it's converted, it doesn't work out to 25,000.
Then you go to Belize. $18,250 Belize dollars. And just talk about conversion. The agreement doesn't say $25,000 Eastern Caribbean currency or its equivalent, you know. It doesn't say that. So if the argument is that $25,000 is unchangeable, then all the countries in the CCJ appellate jurisdiction, in the very law in which they enter the court, they are not talking about $25,000 EC or its equivalent. So we tested by reference to the constitution of all these other countries, and you could see that Barbados, Belize, Guyana, they are not sticking with the 25,000 EC dollars. Dominica chooses to do that, showing you all the countries that are already there have their own arrangement. We test it now with reference to opinions of jurists who we respect. So we gave you one criterion, we give you now another criterion. What do the learned jurists say? So Dennis Byron is the immediate past president of the Caribbean Court of Justice. He was speaking publicly at St. George's University here in Grenada, 2 or 3 weeks ago? And somebody get up and put to him point blank the question, must all countries have the same threshold value for a civil claim relation to appeal to the CCJ? So Dennis answered in simple, clear words. His first word was no. All countries do not have to have the same value. You have a discretion. Each country has a discretion. He's still answering. He says Grenada has set it at $1,500, which now applies to appeals to the CCJ, and Grenada is perfectly entitled to do that. So I ask you, Sheldon, I know we may be a very iconoclastic society sometimes, and a man can just get up and say, oh, well, I am the expert, and who cares about Sir Dennis or Alexis? But if you have to choose between, what is the name you called just now?
Claudette Joseph.
And Sir Dennis, by whom would you be guided?
I'd take Sir Dennis any day. I'd be guided by Sir Dennis any day.
Well, you stumbled and you said, I have to give you one eye. I would blindly follow Sir Dennis any day. So we tested in relation to actual laws on the books in other country. We tested in relation to the opinions of internationally renowned jurists like Sir Dennis. I go further and I tell you, the Attorney General was sitting next to me in my office, Old Fort, and we were canvassing views around the region, not telling them what our view was. And every single person we canvassed, everyone without exception said, but that's clear, Grenada has a discretion, every country has a discretion. So we tested by the written law, the constitution of other countries, we tested by the opinion of internationally renowned jurists, we tested by the opinion of, so to speak, ordinary lawyers. We therefore have no doubt saying to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, as the Privy Council would put it sometimes, there is nothing whatsoever in the suggestion that because we set a threshold value of $1,500, there is a conflict between that and the agreement. No, because the agreement itself tells you that the threshold may be set 3 ways. By the agreement, it says so. I'm reading it for you literally. You don't believe me? Follow with me. Paragraph 1. Look at paragraph 1 at the top there. Go into lines 3 to 4. Right. By the agreement, you see there? Continue reading.
So in the
Paragraph 1, yes, right there.
In the exercise of its appellate
Yes.
jurisdiction, the court is a superior court of record, which its jurisdiction and powers are to be conferred on it by this agreement.
Take your time. By, let's go again. By,
Conferred
just by.
By the Constitution or any...
No, go back.
Or
by
the Constitution...
No, brother.
Or
the first
on
by.
it by this agreement.
Yes,
Or by the Constitution.
Yes.
Or any other law of a contracting party.
Fantastic.
Right.
You can get an A for good reading. Now, let me tell you something. If there was any doubt, all that doubt was removed Friday afternoon. The world saw the extent to which some people will go to lie and to deceive. I'm driving down the Eastern Main Road from funeral. One of our colleagues burying her father in Grenville, and I'm driving down, and I turn on and I see a high functionary of the NDC is appearing on a video. And he's saying words to the effect, there you have it. The Honorable Mr. Tobias Clement driving through the constituency in his car telling people to vote no. The first thing that struck me about that video, and I noticed that Michelle picked it up in her commentaries on the WhatsApp, he is telling you what Tobias Clement is supposed to be saying. But he's not allowing Tobias Clement to speak. So you're not hearing what Tobias Clement is saying. And that hit me. And I noticed Michelle picked it up straight away. She's saying, but I can't hear what the man is saying. A few minutes later, of course, Tobias Clement comes on and he says, that's absolutely a falsehood. So people will go to that level. It's small potatoes for them to come and try to twist the $1,500 and the $25,000, even when we point it out. I remember the first time that lady made a point was at Heinzie School. And I got up. Believe me, Sheldon, I had never focused on this before, but I just picked up the agreement for the first time, focusing on that clause. And I got up and said, wait, not so fast, read paragraph 1. And to be fair to a person who is not a lawyer, J.K. Roberts, when I read it, he got up and he said, Alexis, read that for me again. I read it. Then he said, interpret it for me. Because he could have seen there and then that there is something in this clause. So I interpreted it. I said, this is telling me that the figure may be set by the agreement, alternatively, or it may be set by the Constitution, and there is yet another alternative, or any other law. He scratched his face. He didn't answer, and he sat down. He was obviously troubled. So I answered the question the first time it arose without having the benefit of any other law.
But it has been reposted as of yesterday. That statement has once again been made via social media, trying to let the common man, as far as they know, they want to tell the common man that, listen, what they're trying to put on you is going to be more expensive than what exists right now. The same thing that nobody can go to right now.
That is what they want. That is precisely what they want. I was on a radio program. A man called in. I said the threshold figure is $1,500. You know what the man said to me? Poor people can't afford that. So can you imagine if the threshold figure was $25,000? They'd bury us alive. That's what they wanted.
My goodness. Let me bring Mrs. Steele into this discussion now. We've been seeing quite a bit of information, especially over the last 48 hours. I know Dr. Alexis mentioned the video that was done by the public relation officer of the NDC, Mr. Randall Robinson, who I expect to hear an apology for before tomorrow morning. Don't try to come with no apology afterwards. Apologize now. Be a man. Yeah, be a man for once in your life. Apologize for what you did. But anyhow, that's another story for another time. Sorry about that. But we've been hearing several things. In fact, I'm seeing something here from another lawyer. Another lawyer, I think it's Ms. Francis, who is saying the government select the presidents of the CCJ. The governments pay the CCJ wages. So won't the government's politics interfere in the decision-making process?
I know you put a question to me, Michelle, but because I am a member of the commission, let me answer that first
He's
part.
on the inside.
The government does not select the president of the CCJ. The government does not select any judge of the CCJ. I have with you here, this is the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice, and it tells you how the judges are appointed. First of all, in terms of the president of the CCJ, the president is selected in the following way. The commission sends the nomination to the heads, and the heads formally ratify or don't ratify. Now, if the heads are unhappy with the nomination sent out by us in the Regional and Judicial Legal Services Commission, they can blank it. But one thing they cannot do is the heads cannot come up with their own selection. And that is the bottom line. So they can call us back in the commission and say, this nomination you've sent us here, and I'm reading from Article 4, IV4 of the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice. You go to paragraph 6, and this is what it says. The president shall be appointed or removed by the qualified majority vote of 3/4 of the contracting parties, listen for it, on the recommendation of the commission. So if the heads do not like our recommendation, they can veto it, but most importantly, they cannot come up with their own nomination, selection, or anything of the kind. Let's get that very clear. And
So
let me
it's
repeat
not
that.
an issue that 2 or 3 prime ministers can get together and decide, we want Dr. Francis Alexis
Well, that'd
on,
be a
on
good
the
choice.
CCJ. And they decide that, look, we are putting him there, and they just decide. They can't do it.
They cannot do it.
They can't make that decision.
It would be the wise thing to do. But they cannot do it. They don't have the power. They can only appoint somebody who is recommended by the commission. So they can say, what you have sent me here, you sent us Mr. Branch, and we know that Mr. Branch is on Facebook with his lady, that's all he's concerned about. So, no, we're not going to appoint him. But they can't say, we are instead going to appoint Michelle Steele, although that would be a good choice. But they can't do it, because they can only act. Let me show it to you.
They can
paragraph
only
6 for us.
The president shall be appointed or removed by the qualified majority vote of 3/4 of the contracting parties on the recommendation of the commission.
Thank you.
So it's
And
not
that
it's
means
not a
what it
standalone.
says. What does recommendation mean in constitutional instruments? You go to the Grenada Constitution, for example, the senators, some of them are appointed on the recommendation, some of the prime minister, some of the leader of the opposition. So the leader of the opposition sends a recommendation to the governor general. She can't, Her Excellency can't say, I don't like that recommendation, I'm going to appoint somebody else instead. I mean, this is ABC with the greatest respect. It just can't happen. The recommendation in these instruments, constitutional instruments, is a binding proposal. When a recommendation is made, if the head, for whatever reason feel they're not going to abide by it, they cannot. And that's the important point. As a matter of fact, if you ask me, in my view, if a recommendation is made by the commission and the heads don't go along with it, in my view, a constitutional action might well lie to say that this person is properly in place. But I don't have to go that far. The most important point is that on the paragraph 6 which you have read there, the heads cannot come up with
recommendation.
Their own nomination. They can only act in terms of making an appointment. They can only do so on the recommendation of the commission.
Let me and there's also the question of paying of the wages of the members of, because there's this belief that all Grenada would have to do is decide we ain't gonna pay any money, and to hell with it, we ain't gonna pay any money. So a judge might say, well, look, me ain't get my salary, I have to go the direction they want me to go. Or that Trinidad may do that, or St. Lucia may do that, or so. When it comes to the payments that go to the judges and so on, is it a situation where Grenada on a monthly basis sends a check over to the CCJ? Is it a situation that every year Grenada has a certain amount of money they have to give to the CCJ? What is the situation? I know, Mrs. Steele, I know you have discussed this before. Mr. Branch, we've discussed this before. Dr. Alexis, we've discussed this before. Which is why I'm wondering how Ms. Vanessa Francis, a lawyer, no, I'm calling all your name today. I ain't care because none of you could sue me. Let's say it. Yeah? I'm trying to understand how Ms. Vanessa Francis, a lawyer, could come up with such nonsense. But anyway, explain to us how the judges are paid.
Okay, I will explain to you how the judges are paid, Sheldon, but there's one thing I want to preface the comments with. I was actually looking at the news today in the US, because I'm sure everyone knows that tomorrow is not just referendum day in Grenada and in Antigua, but there are the midterm elections in the US. And the use of the word referendum is also used in the comments now, because they're saying it is a referendum as to the performance of the president. And one of the commentators rightly said, in my opinion, that leaders would say to you, go out there, find some fare for me. I need to bring some fare to the people. And this is what it is all about. Fare to the people. They're saying to people, this is confusing. The bill is confusing. It will alter the constitution and give the government all the power in the world. First of all, we must have some integrity. It is a lie. The bill will alter the constitution in relation to our renaming of our court and in relation to the final court of appeal that we resort to. Instead of the Privy Council, we will go to the CCJ.
Only.
Only. Full stop. They're saying to people, do you understand the bill? Why are you voting yes for something you do not understand? But they themselves understand the bill. And they have been bringing certain issues up. And our friend Dr. Alexis has amply and ably, Justice Byron has amply and ably, the list goes on as to how many authoritative positions have been given to negate, to properly answer the questions or the points raised. In other words, these things are not correct. You are telling the people untruths. But once again, they continue. The bill is confusing. We don't understand. They have come to the meetings, our meetings. I'm there, I've witnessed it, and dominated the mic. There's a handful of people, 5 or 6 people dominating the mic. So people cannot get their questions in, cannot leave with their questions answered, simply because they spend the time on the mic talking about all sorts of things. I think in the US they call that a filibuster, right? In Congress. Talk, and not letting people really get the answers that they are seeking. And it is time for this to stop. That's why I say this is a vote about study. We need to go, we need to research, you need to listen, learn, be educated, ask your questions. But don't let anyone make you afraid of voting yes. That's the first thing. In relation to the trust fund and the payment of salaries, we have said it time and time again. This has been paid for. This court has been paid for in that we have raised a $100 million US trust fund, and the board is comprised of private sector individuals and organizations for civil society, etc. So in other words, this is really, when we talk about we court, the level of transparency and accountability that we are seeking, or that the CCJ has sought to establish, is in the creation of these boards that manage the trust fund, that pay for the court. So the politicians do not pay for the court. So that's the answer to the question. One, the politicians do not pay the salaries of the judges every month. The politicians or the governments would have paid up front for this fund, this trust fund, to run the court. Mia Motley would have indicated that maybe in a few years to come, there might be a need for top-up based on investment of the fund and the amount of the fund. But at the end of the day, this is not a day-to-day. We can't say, well, the court isn't running because Antigua didn't make their contribution or Grenada didn't make their contribution. The judges don't have any fear of a politician picking up the phone and saying, take him off because he didn't find against me. As a matter of fact, all of the judgments that we have seen from the court in relation to citizens bringing matters against governments, the court has ruled against the governments. So what other evidence do you want than that? And we are saying to people, treat this, or make your decision on the evidence. People are telling you things, be afraid, be very afraid. But where is the evidence? And I hope I've amply answered that question, but
yes,
it's really about that.
If I may, Sheldon, I wish to add to what Michelle spoke about regard to the trust fund. And what is important that you need to note with regard to the trust fund is that when the trust fund was created, the actuaries, I think they recall, decided that $100 million US would be sufficient to fund the court, because it is the interest on the $100 million US, which is used to pay the judges' salaries, etc. And what we have seen, what the evidence has shown, because if you go to the CCJ website itself, ccj.org, you can see the report of the trust fund. And the trust fund has been performing quite well. The trust fund did take a hit in 2008 with the international financial crisis. I think every country in the world took a hit. The top private sector companies in the United States took a hit. If you remember the car manufacturers, Chrysler, Ford, etc., Obama was president in the United States at the time, had to give what is called a bailout to some of these big companies. So the trust fund took a hit. That went up to about $68 million US. But since then, it has been performing quite well and has gone back up to close to $87 million US. So we should have no fear that this trust fund is able to sustain the court and to run the court, pay the salaries of the court, etc. Because when we look at the evidence, when we look at the performance of the trust fund and the return on investment, because it's invested through the world, stocks and bonds, etc., and the management of the fund, it has been doing quite well, given the hit it took in 2008.
Okay, and folks?
Sheldon, just to elaborate a little bit on the point we were talking about with the Board of Trustees of the Trust Fund and the composition of that board. I have it here direct from the CCJ website. The Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, the President of the Insurance Association of the Caribbean, the Chairman of the Association of Indigenous Banks of the Caribbean, the President of the Caribbean Institute of Chartered Accountants, the President of the Organization of Commonwealth Caribbean Bar Associations, the Chairman of the Conference of Heads of the Judiciary of Member States of the Caribbean Community, the President of the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce, and the President of the Caribbean Congress of Labor. Now, how can you be not more widely represented? And you were going to say something, Sheldon. I think you really need to say.
I'm wondering which politician is involved there, because I didn't hear to say the leader of the political party in Antigua or the prime minister or the government minister with responsibility for it's all civil society and non-governmental, private sector
It is very
organizations.
interesting indeed. When the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, the Honorable Dame Janice Pereira, was delivering her State of the Court message at the beginning of the term, this current law term, September, it struck me. One of the comments her ladyship made was that the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court does not have a trust fund, but they're doing their best. Now, what does that tell one? That tells me that the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court is certifying that the concept of a trust fund is fundamental to guaranteeing the independence financially of a court. And it's not only the Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. We know that regional courts around the world, in Africa, in Asia, even the Canadians are looking at this trust fund arrangement as a sheath, a buffer between an independent court and the political powers that be.
Because other than that, we would have ended up with a situation like exists in the United States right now, where basically the president decides. He says, I want Devon Romain as my next judge that I'm going to place on the, what do you call it, the United States Supreme Court. And once they are appointed, they're there until they either resign or die, one or the other. Yeah. They have to either resign or die.
You see,
you can't even
what we are noticing before our very eyes is people in other parts of the world are looking at this model called the Caribbean Court of Justice. The Privy Council, and let me read it for you to tell you what the Privy Council itself has had to say. Looking at the trust fund, looking at the commission role in appointing judges, selecting judges, this is what the Privy Council said. Anybody following? Jamaica Council for Human Rights against Marshall Burnett, 65 West India Report at page 268. Remember I told you just now, the Privy Council almost always refers to itself not as the Privy Council but as the board. So I'm reading now. The board has no difficulty in accepting and does not doubt that the CCJ agreement represents a serious and conscientious endeavor to create a new regional court of high quality and complete independence, enjoying all the advantages which a regional court could hope to enjoy. This is a testimony of the Privy Council about the independence of the CCJ. I can refer you to cases as far away as Singapore, where the highest court in Singapore is referring to judgments of the Caribbean Court of Justice with respect and citing it as authority for propositions. I cannot refer you to judgments of the Privy Council itself, looking at judgments of the CCJ and commenting favorably upon them. But you will have some of our own people here doing the best they can to cast aspersions, doubt about the machinery of the CCJ, the integrity, the learning, the quality of the CCJ. I guess that's all part of human development, national development.
All right, and folks, we are speaking in studio with Dr. Francis Alexis and Mrs. Michelle Steele and Mr. Robert Branch of the CCJ Advisory Committee and also Committed Grenadian Patriots. So here they're speaking about Marisho and Fedor and Maurice Bishop and all of that, and giving a lot of information, clearing up a lot of misinformation. And the thing is, one of the problems we have is you like to keep information for us. Don't keep it for yourself. Scream it from the mountaintops. Let others know. because quite a bit of misinformation has been put out there over the past few days. We're going to take a short break and be right back. So we're going to take a short break right about now, and we will be right back.
They have been finally...
And I not opposed to the CCJ.
You know, we should have been the first one signing on to the CCJ. We should have been. I don't know what happened, but given what we did then, we should have been the first. So keep that in the back of your minds with those of you who have all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't do it.
I'm convinced that the CCJ is better for this region than the Privy Council at this point in time. And I am saying it will be better for many, many years to come. So I am simply asking of you to vote yes for the CCJ.
The National Democratic Congress is not and has never been opposed to the CCJ. In fact, previous administrations led by the NDC have done lots of work to push forward the work of the CCJ, and that can be attested to by Brother Peter David. The CCJ is another step towards the achievement of Caribbean unity. And in the NDC, we know that eventually, one way or the other, the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction will become a reality, not only in Grenada, but throughout the Caribbean.
On November 6, 2018, Grenadians will go to the polls to vote in a referendum. The polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 5 p.m. Remember, first check the voters list outside the polling station before seeing the poll clerk, who will enter your name into the poll book. The presiding officer will then instruct you how to vote before issuing you with a folded ballot paper. After voting, remember to fold the ballot paper how it was given to you. You will then immerse your finger into the electoral ink before placing your ballot into the box. This is a message from the Parliamentary Elections Office. The Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts present Youth Week 2018, empowering our youth, shaping our community, protecting our future. The week of activities kicks off on Friday, November 9th with the Minister's Address from 8 p.m. Saturday, 10th November, Health Fair, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Cuthbert Peters Park, War, and the Fitness Revolution, 3 p.m. Concord Junction. Sunday, 11th November, it's the Peace Concert, Grenville Brush Terminal. On Tuesday, 13th November, ministers meet with the youth at Her Majesty's Prison. Thursday, 15th November from 5 p.m. It's the Imani Graduation, Youth Awards and Gala. And on Friday, 16th through the weekend, it's the National Youth Service Weekend. Every parish get involved. And on Saturday, 17th November, it's Youth Expo, Explosion Fashion and Cultural Day. 2 p.m. until at Hero Square, Victoria in St. Mark. So remember, Youth Week 2018, November 9th to the 17th. On November 6, 2018, Grenadians will go to the polls to vote in a referendum. The polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 5 p.m. Remember, first check the voters list outside the polling station before seeing the poll clerk, who will enter your name into the poll book. The presiding officer will then instruct you how to vote before issuing you with a folded ballot paper. After voting, remember to fold the ballot paper how it was given to you. You will then immerse your finger into the electoral ink before placing your ballot into the box. This is a message from the Parliamentary Elections Office.
Reaching one unity, coming together as one. Hear what we say. When you see November 6, we voting yes for the CCJ. Come out and make the right decision. It benefits in everybody. The Caribbean Court of Justice is what I come to promote. So when that time we just stick
morning once again, and welcome back to our discussion. Right in studio with us, we have Dr. Francis Alexis, Mrs. Michelle Steele, and Mr. Branch. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
They're all here as most of you have been listening, explaining, right, and giving information as much as possible on the whole question of the CCJ, the importance of it, and some of the dishonesty that is put out there by some of the naysayers. And so, Dr. Alexis, I just want to, one question that have been out there for the longest while is that, why the rush now? That is what they have been saying out there. Why Grenada is rushing to go to the CCJ at this point in time?
Absolutely no rush, Devon. We have been talking Privy Council, CCJ, consistently since 2014. You will recall that there were 7 bills before the people in the referendum of 2016. And it is very interesting that of the 7 bills, the one in relation to which most people voted was the CCJ bill. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying more people voted yes for the CCJ bill than for the other bills. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you tally the yes votes and the no votes for each bill to get the number of people who voted on each bill, you will see that I think it was 22,276 or thereabouts. In any event, the highest number of people voted in relation to the CCJ bill than in relation to any other bill. That cannot be denied. Now, what does that tell one? That tells us that the people of this country were saying in 2016, of those 7 bills, the one which we would want to discuss some more is the CCJ bill. You remember Paul trying to convert Agrippa, and Agrippa is saying, you almost persuaded me. Come back at a convenient time. This is the convenient time. Why is it convenient now? It is convenient because no general election is just around the corner. People are not falling into lines depending on what color clothing they're wearing. So we're not in the mode of a general election. We are discussing the bill, so to speak, in and of itself. That's why people are soaking in more now than before. I'm not suggesting that between 2014 and now every single day or week or month we have been discussing the bill. But if you take, for example, Ruggles Ferguson, that man has been going non-stop discussing CCJ without end between 2014 and now. I myself, not as intently as Ruggles, have been engaging in discussions on the CCJ, putting a little paper here and there. So there is absolutely no rush whatsoever. If anything, we are, relatively speaking, late because we signed the agreement in 2001, and the day we signed the agreement, we committed ourselves to discussing with our people the idea of getting into the appellate jurisdiction, as Barbados did right away, 2005, Guyana did right away, 2005, Belize did 2010, and don't forget St. Vincent and the Grenadines tried in 2009, Trinidad and Tobago, and last September here, that the Prime Minister will be taking a motion into the House of Representatives to get Trinidad and Tobago into the appellate jurisdiction by next year. So we are not in any rush at all.
One other thing, what was the wisdom in the framers of the Constitution of most of the Caribbean countries or the those who are aligned to Britain as to make, for example, in Grenada's case, a 2/3 majority, right, to basically amend the constitution, and in some instance you need a simple majority. I mean, why is that?
You read the commentaries on the drafting of the Jamaica Independence Constitution, and some of those commentaries they make you giddy, right? Because what they show you is that at the time, 1962, the people of the Caribbean were so unused to the concept of independence that certainly when Jamaica started drafting that independence constitution, you have to say, not only in retrospect, because some of the commentators at the time were protesting, this constitution is a model. I remember one of the commentators making the commentary saying that this looks like Marx Brothers constitutional lawmaking. How can you give to the Senate of Jamaica, which is a hand-picked forum, not put there by the people, authority and power to veto measures sent up by the people's representatives in the House of Representatives, and then, having done that, you compound the felony by turning around and saying in the Constitution, if, however, the Senate vetoes the House, you can then go to the people and ask the people, so to speak, to undo what the Senate did. Well, let's look at that. When you give the Senate power to block the people's representatives, you are saying, in effect, you have more confidence in hand-picked people to get it right than the people's representatives to get it right. And you still turn around now and go to the same people and ask them whether what was done by the Senate should be unblocked. Does that make any sense? But what does that tell us? So novel was the concept of going into independence. And the property classes were so accustomed to taking up the phone and dialing London and say that the people's representatives here in Kingston, look, they're going to destroy the country. They're so uneducated. They're trade union leaders. They don't know anything. That is what people like Bustamante had to contend with. If you look at Trinidad and Tobago, and it's interesting because Trinidad and Tobago had different issues, the ethnic problems, but because of the stature of Eric Williams, he was able to not have these referendum requirements. Errol Barrow, he did not have either the ethnic problems or the entrenched class antagonisms you had in Jamaica, so he too was able to get Barbados free from these 2/3 referendum requirements. Well, let's go to Grenada now. Grenada was the first Eastern Caribbean country to become independent. And you had all the fears you could have had. When the talks are taking place in London, Hubert Blaze is in the conference room telling the British, Grenada, his words, not my words, Grenada is too poor and too small to become independent. And who is sitting next to him? No less an intellectual than whom? Bernard Coad. Now you have different mixtures sitting there. You have Bernard Coad with his own agenda, and you have Hubert Blaze, poor guy, with his own agenda. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. Fast forward to 1979 and you know what happened. Now, Eric Gairy had the first problem, that he had to convince the British that he could get into independence at all without a referendum. And that was pulling tooth without sedative. Because Hubert Blaze was just saying, his own words, not my words, this is constitutionally immoral and unethical. And the British are saying, there's nothing unethical about that, Mr. Blaze. But you couldn't dare ask Eric Gairy to take the further step of saying to the British, And when we want to amend the Constitution, we don't think we have to have a referendum. Remember, the GNP was saying, you have to have a referendum to go independence. You must remember that. That's why you had the strikes in St. George's the night before independence. All of that was part of it. So for him to have gotten away without having a referendum to go independence, that was enough. He really couldn't fight it with this, telling the British, and when I want to amend the Constitution, I don't have to go to the referendum polls. So it was not an easy thing at all. Then when you get to Dominica now, all the fear, all the worry, all the anxiety has subsided. So the independent talks for Dominica and London, it is now the opposition which is saying we shouldn't go into independence with Her Majesty as our head of state. We should go into independence as a republic and with indeed an executive president, to show you how far we had gone from Jamaica to Grenada to get to Dominica. The opposition is now saying at the independence talks, let's go straight as a republic. Furthermore, they put a clause into the Constitution talking about an agreement between Dominica and the United Kingdom to get Dominica out of the Privy Council. I look at that clause and I say to Dominica, Dominica, you see this clause? In my view, this clause can get you out of the Privy Council and into the Caribbean Court of Justice one fell swoop. And they questioned me, why do you say, how could you say such a thing? So I wrote an opinion for them. I said, in any event, Dominica, you have nothing to lose. Say to the British, you interpret this clause this way and see what they say. You have nothing to lose. Dominica put the question to London. It took London less time to respond than it took for me to convince Dominica. London responded and said, we agree with you, Dominica. And that's why Dominica was able to go into the CCJ without having a referendum, although there is provision in the Constitution for the referendum, you know. And that is why you would have noticed when Prime Minister Skerrit came here, I was not sitting on the head table, but he singled me out in the crowd. And he explained to the crowd why they had invited me to come and give the feature address the day Dominica acceded to the CCJ. It was because I said to him, you have nothing to lose. Tell them this is your view. They may agree, they may not agree. And Dominica could not believe how quickly London agreed. So that question you raised takes us way back into our history to explain how we became independent, what deals we had to strike. And that's what I began this morning by saying that the more things change, the more they remain the same. The night before we became independent, Grenada, people were out on strike, saying we don't want to go independent, meaning not under Gary. Today, the day before we vote on the referendum tomorrow, people out on strike. And why? They're not putting it in that language, but that is the meaning of it. This is an attempt to cause, what is the word you all are using? Fear, confusion, worry, anxiety. For what purpose? What, anybody could read the purpose.
Indeed. If I may, Devon, in relation to the question you asked Dr. Alexis regarding the history and the rush, why we have in this rush, there definitely isn't a rush. Certainly by the Caribbean and Grenada in particular. Because it was since 1901 that the Caribbean first discussed this issue of a final Caribbean court. And there was this well-published editorial in the Jamaica Gleaner. If you go to the CCJ website, you can see that editorial. And certainly throughout the years, it's something that we've discussed in the Caribbean. In 1970, the Jamaica delegation to the Heads of Government Conference of the region brought a motion to the conference discussing the whole issue of a final court. And the court was, of course, the agreement establishing the court in 2001, which was inaugurated in 2005. With respect to Grenada's participation, so as you know, I am a public servant. I have worked for all governments since I've joined the public service. And in 2010, I was asked by the government then, the NDC government, to become involved in constitution reform. And I was transferred to the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And when I got to the ministry, I started doing some research to see what is the basis for this constitution reform process. And I discovered that we had two commissions discussing constitution reform. One which reported in 1985, and another one which started in 2002 and gave its report in 2006. And that 2006 report discussed the whole idea of a federal appellate court, the CCJ, being based in the Caribbean. And I also discovered that Professor Simeon McIntosh was contracted by the Grenada government then, which is not this present administration, to do a new draft constitution. And an essential element of that constitution proposed Grenada acceding to the Caribbean Court of Justice. That was 2010. And we've had several discussions, several consultations throughout Grenada. Professor McIntosh and I even traveled to North America to discuss with the diaspora there. I'm saying 2010, 2011, by 2012. And in the meantime, the Ministry of Legal Affairs was having discussions with the leadership of both parties. And Dr. Michaud was in opposition then. We met with him and his party executive every 3 months or so to brief him on the discussions on this new draft constitution. So by 2012, we had in the Ministry of Legal Affairs starting to discuss a resolution to go to the Parliament. And the essential element in this resolution was to say that both parties agreed, the government and opposition, to having a referendum. And that whichever party won the next general election will have a referendum on this issue of the new draft constitution. Of course, Parliament was prorogued, we couldn't go to Parliament then, the government changed. And the new government immediately took up the mantle basically. So Professor McIntosh in the meantime had passed away, Dr. Alexis became involved. So since 2010, we have never stopped discussing this issue of constitution reform, and in particular, the issue of the CCJ. This is something that we voted on in 2016, and it's essentially the same bill. It's not a fundamentally different bill. What we did this time was to take out certain provisions, because you know, the bill in 2016 had several issues being discussed. Apart from the CCJ, we had renaming the court, we had a new code of ethics, a code of conduct, we had the issue of the retirement age for judges, we had also the issue of changing the allegiance to the Queen, we are changing the Chief of Police to Commissioner of Police, which was, when we listened to the people, it was quite complicated to have all these issues. So we then said, let's go with the issue of the CCJ, the single issue. And we added, of course, the issue of renaming the court, which isn't controversial. We don't hear much discussion on that. But this is an issue that has been well discussed throughout Grenada. Indeed, speaking to myself, I've been to every secondary school. We arranged with Grenlec then to have the topic as a topic in the Grenlec debates. We've been to Carrickwood, all the communities, and we have been throughout Grenada discussing this. I think that anyone who says that...
And Pitimatic.
And Pitimatic. And Pitimatic, not forget the Pitimatic. And so I feel sad that we've reached this, that there are people suggesting that there is some agenda. I'm like...
Let me ask a question here, because we have that constant fear. Again, I'm gonna refer to Mr. Steele's terminology, the fear that's being thrown at a lot of people out there, that there's some hidden agenda within the bill. And this is coming from people who've had this bill in their hands over 6 months now. This is not coming from people who've just seen the bill or become aware of the bill last week or week before the end of September or so. These are people that, since the bill had been drafted, have been sent copies of the bills for different consultations on it. And I've only now, with days running to the referendum, I've started to throw out all sort of things. Briefly this morning, flicking through the channels, I heard Miss Claudette Joseph again, and it seems to always be her, saying that the bill that is now before the Grenadian people contains things about the police commissioner and all this sort of thing, saying that somebody sent a copy of it and said they got it on the CCJ website, and I don't know where CCJ Advisory Committee website. I don't know CCJ Advisory Committee has any website. They have the Facebook page, and that the bill that's before there deals with the Attorney General and judges and police commissioner, again creating confusion in the minds of people.
But that's simply not true.
Well, let's focus on that. I was walking you through the bill clause by clause in relation to the CCJ, and I had reached clause 9. Clause 10 is simply saying there shall be no appeals from the CCJ. That's put there out of caution. Clause 11 is in the interpretation section, identifying the agreement establishing the CCJ as the one signed in Barbados. Clause 12 is repealing orders on UKPC appeals because there will be no Privy Council if the people vote yes tomorrow. Clause 13 is the sweeping up clause I referred you to earlier on. This is the clause which says that if you, in any written law not specified above, see any reference to the Privy Council, by whatsoever name it might be called, delete that and put in instead the Caribbean Court of Justice. Clause 14 says that if there is any law which says that a decision of the Court of Appeal is final, that's the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal, then no appeal will lie under that law to the CCJ. And then clauses 15 and 16 provide that in the case of current appeals pending before the Privy Council, they will continue before the Privy Council as if the bill had not been passed, but that the consent of parties can transfer it to the CCJ. So the bill in relation to the CCJ identifies every particular provision in the Constitution it addresses. Nowhere in the bill, I want to make two very important points here. Point one, nowhere in the bill expressly, impliedly, or by implication attempts to say that after the bill is passed, Parliament or Cabinet or anybody else whosoever can turn around and alter, amend, or change any other provision of the Constitution. Very much contrary to the same kind of propaganda about which we saw on Friday afternoon. We have to keep referring to that to impress upon our listeners or viewers the extent to which people can go in spreading lies, falsehood, and truth. Now, one thing is clear about constitutional law, especially when it comes to amending a constitution which is the supreme law of law, as Grenada is. When a bill, if you look at the bill, when a bill is amending the Constitution, it has to do two things. One, it has to say in its long title that it is a bill to amend the Constitution, and it has to say in that short title what it is seeking to do. So that, for example, in particular, if it is seeking to empower Parliament to turn around and alter other provisions, it has to say so expressly in this part of the bill, which is called the long title. There are numerous decisions of highest courts across the Commonwealth which make clear that If you are about to amend your constitution as a supreme law, you have to zero in on which provision you're seeking to amend. That is why they tell you in the very first recital what is the mission of the bill, namely to provide for the establishment of the CCJ as the final appellate court for Grenada, replacing the Privy Council, and to rename the Supreme Court. No other objective is set here, and nowadays, under the purposive rule of construction, a court of law will look to your long title and your specific enacting provisions to see what you said you are asking the people to vote on. You can't come back later on and say, well, you intended to empower Parliament to come around now and change other provisions of the Constitution. It cannot work that way. Let's take the recent decision of the Caribbean Court of Justice, a very important case from Guyana, Attorney General and Richardson. This is a term limits case from Guyana. They passed an act there to forbid any person from being the state president for more than 2 terms. And the CCJ is discussing the question of amending the Constitution by implication. And read the judgment of Sir Dennis Byron in particular. He is making the point that when it comes to amending a Constitution by implication, the courts are very clear about it. They are not in the business of tolerating this amending the Constitution by a side wind in a hidden agenda. They're not in the business of doing that. You have to be explicit what it is you're doing. Set it out up front. And I add, in particular, where the people are voting in the referendum. And that was one of the guiding principles in that case. Namely, when you come in to amend the Constitution, you have to say exactly what you're doing. If you don't do that, you're in no business. And that is why they were saying that that bill made it very clear what it sought to do, namely to impose a term limit. And that was done, and they're giving effect to it. But to come and say that you could add something else, that Parliament can come and use this act to come later and amend the Constitution at large, and any lawyer saying that must know that that is utter rubbish. And the only reason any lawyer could make a statement like that is that the lawyer has political agenda of her own. And I say so without any fear of contradiction. Let's go to the Privy Council Jamaica decision, Jamaica Council of Human Rights, and Marshall Burnett. And it was specifically on the basis that you have to be setting out clearly what you want to do, that the Privy Council was striking down those 3 acts passed by the Parliament of Jamaica to move Jamaica out of the Privy Council and into the CCJ, because their lordship said the independence of the judiciary is a foremost principle of the Constitution. And if then you are going to interfere with that and give to the CCJ authority over the Court of Appeal of Jamaica, you have to spell it out clearly, and you have to go, well, it seems as though that's what they're saying, you have to go to the people with it. Not, they're talking about the independence of the judiciary. And what are we talking about here? The same thing. The independence of the judiciary of the CCJ to guarantee our rights better. You hear some people saying, yes, you know, it's amazing, Sheldon. You think about it. I attended a forum, and some of them were saying, what nonsense are you all doing there? You all are entrenching the entire CCJ agreement with its protocols. So if we have to amend that, we have to go back to the people. That's what I was saying. I got up and I showed that is not being done. The same people, Sheldon, a week later, then turned around and said, this bill is faulty because you all are not entrenching the commission. So one day they are saying it's faulty because you entrench the whole bill and the whole agreement. Next week they are saying it's faulty because you didn't entrench the commission. They will say anything. And all we can do is respond to propaganda they put out from day to day. We are monitoring and we are putting out. And I do want to repeat, and the best decisions of the CCJ and of the Privy Council, if any bill is mad enough to want to say, you the people of Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, give to the Parliament of this country power to amend any provision of the Constitution they wish any time without coming back to you. No court will tolerate that. It will have to be spelled out clearly, unambiguously, for that to pass. So there is nothing at all in the suggestion. And they cannot point you to any clause in this bill. Next time you hear them saying so, between now and midnight tonight, campaigning stops. Ask them which clause they are referring to, and you know what the answer will be? Well, it's implied. You see the dishonesty? Because they can't refer to any word or words in the bill which they can argue intends to have that effect. So they retreat to the indefinite. It's implied.
Let me just say here, folks, we're going to open the phone lines in a short while. 440-7377. That's 440-7377, and Devon, the overseas number
347-329-3101.
Yeah, we're going to open the phone lines. We're heading up. We're going up till 1 p.m. We are going up till 1 p.m. So don't go and think at 12 o'clock you're going to run out the house and all kind of thing. You have to follow us in the car wherever you're going. We're going up till 1 p.m. You have the opportunity to call in now, 440-7377 and
347-329-3101.
Dr. Alexis, there are two things that I keep hearing repeated over the weekend. Two very sensitive issues when it comes to the Grenadian people. And I was sort of tentative in raising the issue, but it has been raised in several quarters over the weekend in relation to the CCJ. One of them is referring to the CCJ as a hanging court. That's the first one, that some people are referring to the CCJ as a hanging court. That the CCJ going to be the court that comes in and just start to hang people left, right, and center. The second one is an issue referring to the CCJ as the court that's going to legalize gay marriage and homosexuality, etc., that sort of thing. What is your response to that?
Well, I could take the second one first. I can't sit here and tell you how any court might decide a matter, but what I can tell you with full confidence is that if we remain in the Privy Council, based on decisions given by the Privy Council already, there can be no doubt about it, not only by the Privy Council, but of the UK Supreme Court, way back in a case called, I think it's Bull, which was about 2003. See if you could get Bull in the, I think it was House of Lords at the time. The Privy Council judges have always made it clear that this is the court you come to when you want to defend the right to sexual orientation. I've never made any. They were interpreting, the Privy Council was interpreting a clause in the Constitution of, I can't remember the country, word for word with the Grenada Constitution. You have freedom from discrimination based on sex. And the Privy Council said that the word sex there includes sexual orientation. Even the High Court of Belize, 3 years ago or so, decided that in the context of the Constitution of Belize, freedom from discrimination based on sex includes your right to your sexual orientation. So I can tell you with absolute confidence, based on decisions given by the Privy Council and the House of Lords, I think it's Bull and I can't remember the name.
Right, fine, yeah.
That is the court you go to if you want sexual orientation right. I do not say, I cannot say that even the Privy Council will uphold man marrying man and woman marrying man. I cannot say that. I'm not prepared to go that far. But I am absolutely clear. When it comes to sexual orientation, get your ticket to the Privy Council and you're in business. No two ways about that.
Dr. Alexis, I would say here though that only in September, in a judgment that was handed down in a case in the UK, at the UK Supreme Court, Lady Hale, who also happens to be one of the lords on the Privy Council, made the following statement. When they ruled against a gay couple that would have tried to buy a certain cake at a place, but she ruled that it was not because they were gay that the company did not do the cake for them. But she also made the statement that this conclusion is not in any way to diminish the need to protect gay people and people who support gay marriage from discrimination. Those are the words of Lady Hale, who is one of the judges on the Privy Council and also one of the judges, the justices on the Privy Council, who
She's the head of the Privy Council.
Well, she's been reviewing cases in relation to the region, and she's saying there's a need to protect gay marriage and protect gay people.
There you are. What was to have Bull? No,
and this is just from the 10th of October. It's been on the BBC, etc. This is just a statement that she made on the 10th of October.
But like I say, I'm not prepared to take it even to the extent to which you quote Lady Hale there for the time being. But there can be no doubt about it. If you want to protect your sexual orientation rights, get your ticket to the Privy Council. The sooner the better. Now,
wait, before you go forward, I think we have a caller.
Good morning and welcome.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, good morning, and good morning to your learned guest this morning. I must say it's a very interesting program, and a matter of fact, this morning I've been listening to Dr. Alexis on another radio station and bringing a lot of clarity on the CCJ as the final court of appeal instead of the Privy Council. And I want to just ask you to elaborate on two things for me, which I didn't hear that coming across, Will Grenada be honoring its treaty obligations? Because since on the 14th of February 2001, together with other CARICOM countries, has signed up an agreement. I want to explain that. And I want to say the CCJ is more accessible to the ordinary man as the court will be the final, the final appeals. How the ordinary man in Grenada will be able to benefit from it. Thank you. Have a good day.
The first question first. I will ask Michelle to deal with the second part, accessible. I'm looking here at the preamble to the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice. What is the role of a preamble in a legal document, including a constitution? The purpose of a preamble is to set the tone of the document. It gives context and atmosphere to the document. As a matter of fact, nowadays, courts of law look to preambles, whether it's a general preamble in the Constitution or the specific preamble in the Bill of Rights. They look to the preamble to get their atmosphere for the document as a whole. So they are setting out this preamble here in the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice. It says the contracting parties convinced that the Caribbean Court of Justice, the court, will have a determinative role in the further development of Caribbean jurisprudence through the judicial process. And this is the first recital. So this is telling us that the first vision in the sight of the founding parents of this document is that they are establishing a Caribbean Court of Justice to, among other things, have a determinative role in the further development of Caribbean jurisprudence. How is this to be done? This is to be done, I don't say only, but principally, by the CCJ being made the final appellate court, so that its judgments can guide the development of Caribbean jurisprudence. It follows necessarily from that there is a treaty obligation on the part of every country which signs this agreement to do its best to put the court in such a position that it can have this very first recital fulfilled, being having a determinative role in the further development of Caribbean jurisprudence. That is why when the debate was raging as to where the court should be seated, the then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Basdeo Panday, gave assurances to his ministerial colleagues across the region that if the court were seated, located in Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago would in short order accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the court, because that was very much an issue. Things have happened since then. It is very gratifying to hear the current Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago say last September that he's about to correct history and to have Trinidad and Tobago accede. But the short answer to your question is that very much so. The very first recital is telling you, not using those words, but indeed doing better than merely using those words, setting it as your very first ambition in signing the treaty, that you do have a treaty obligation to do your best to make the CCJ the final appellate court for your country, so that it can indeed have a determinative role in the further development of Caribbean jurisprudence through the judicial process.
Okay, so Dr. Alexis has asked me to deal with the accessibility of the court, and that is part of how the court would affect the ordinary man. Now, I think what we have to start by saying is that courts, or the role of a court, is the administration of justice. So that means, what does that mean? It means that when a person brings a claim to a court, there is a efficient, swift action taken for that court to hear the matter and to send the matter through the system. If someone wants to appeal, then they are able to go on to appeal, etc. There's also a saying, justice delayed is justice denied. So we want to ensure that we put this context on whatever discussion that's going forward. The current situation in Grenada is that we would have a court, a matter would start in the magistrate's court or the high court, and if there's dissatisfaction with the decision, there is a right to appeal. And right now that appeal will go to the Court of Appeal. Now our Court of Appeal is based in St. Lucia. We share a Court of Appeal with the rest of the OECS territories. That court is a court that travels. So you'll find that they'll be in St. Lucia, they have a St. Lucia sitting, they go to Grenada, they go to Antigua, etc. If there's a matter that's urgent and needs to be heard before the Court of Appeal, and it's from Grenada, we can travel from Grenada and go to the Court of Appeal, wherever it is sitting, and the Court of Appeal will hear us. So that is the first layer of appeal. The second and final layer of appeal that's also available to us is the Privy Council.
And the Privy Council, if you were to appeal to the Privy Council is there. They say it is free to access the Privy Council. However, there are certain other requirements that are needed. What are those requirements? First of all, sometimes you may ask for an opinion from counsel in the UK. Counsel would charge you tens of thousands of pounds for that opinion. You don't necessarily have to get that opinion. You can go straight to the Privy Council. You have to pay the lawyers there. I have been involved in my 24 years of practice in one Privy Council matter because I had one client that could take the matter to the Privy Council. That client had to pay £20,000 just for a QC to look at the file and to advise on the matter. That £20,000 was only in relation to one application for permission to bring our appeal to the Privy Council. So we had to go to the Privy Council in the first instance to seek permission to bring the actual appeal to the Privy Council. Now, I'm not saying that in the CCJ there will not be a similar situation, but I'm trying to give you, by way of an example, how much money that you have to actually find and provide, the resources it takes to get your matter to the Privy Council. So what has happened in reality? People stop at the Court of Appeal, the OECS Court of Appeal, because the Privy Council is almost, it's there, yes, it's available, yes, but it's really not a practical reality for so many of us, for 99% of our population. So in the opposite direction, or let me just finish with a statistic from the Privy Council. Since Grenada is independent, Dr. Alexis can bear me out on this. Only 15 cases have been brought from Grenada to the Privy Council. We've been independent for 44 years. 8 of those cases were murder appeals. And in the case of murder, we are always told that people are willing to pay for your appeal for murder for some reason. So you are able to go and access, and the judges, the lawyers are willing to do the matter for next to nothing. So that's the first thing. The CCJ, on the other hand, different kettle of fish. The CCJ is not only staffed with judges of competence and quality who have themselves been privy councillors. So there's absolutely no question of the same quality of judges. These judges, some of them have sat on international forums. It is also composed of judges not only from the Caribbean, but from the wider the world, from the globally. Currently, there's currently an English judge who is an authority on the law of trust, and there is a judge from the Netherlands who's an authority on the Roman Dutch application of law, civil law, which is relevant to Guyana as a jurisdiction, and there is also relevance to Suriname and the some land law in St. Lucia. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the location of the court. The court is located in Trinidad and Tobago. And there is no need necessarily for you to travel to Trinidad and Tobago to get new lawyers from Trinidad and Tobago to argue your matters. You simply use your lawyers to argue your matters before the CCJ. This court was born in the age of technology, and this court allows you, does not insist that you travel. It allows you to have your matters heard by video conference, or even better, the court can come to you. So we have heard about the famous Shanique Myrie case, where the court would have traveled to Jamaica to hear the witnesses of Shanique Myrie and to hear her evidence. She would have brought this matter against the Barbados immigration authorities. The court traveled to Barbados to hear that evidence and delivered its judgment by video conference. In the Eddie Ventos case out of Barbados on elections, we speak about the swiftness in which the court heard the appeal. The appeal was heard on Friday, filed on Friday. How was it filed? It was filed with the use of e-filing over the internet, online. The matter was heard on Sunday by video conference, and there was a delivery of the judgment on Monday. So there's that understanding, and there's access. In cases of financial resources needed to get to the court has made provision in cases, or they say deserving cases, where persons cannot afford to bring their matters, to treat the cases as indigent cases and waive filing fees and court fees for the hearing of these matters. If the court considers that the matter involved, or the issue of law involved, is important enough, the court will reach into the jurisdiction of these claimants and ask lawyers to argue the matter for free, because it is an important point for the development of jurisprudence and to be decided on. Because that is exactly what has been happening. You know, you talk about things slipping through the cracks. With the Privy Council, our West Indian issues, they slip through the chasm, or the crater, or the canyon, because we have so many issues and points of law that have come out of cases, out of disputes between individuals in the past, that simply cannot get to the final appellate level because of the lack of resources. So it's like our justice system operates without an arm, without a foot. It is not whole. And as a result of that, if we cannot provide that to the people, then we are limping along. And how much longer are we to do this? Where the Caribbean Court of Justice has an established track record. It's been there in existence for 13 years. It is part of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. So there is a treaty obligation on the part of Grenada to accede to the court. But that treaty obligation can only be fulfilled if we go through our constitutional procedures, hence the referendum. I think I've covered.
Absolutely. I would just add, this is not mere theory at all. My classic example is a man coming down from St. David's, car runs off the road, loses an arm, he's put down, he's asked to pay £26,600, which would be equivalent to about 55,000 EC dollars. He pays $20,000, then the lawyers in London tell him he has to pay more, but they won't tell him how much. They can't tell him how much. He says, refund me my money. They only refund him 7,000, so he loses 13,000 pounds. And that was on a point which was relevant to every working person in this country. Namely, was he in the course and out of his employment when he got injured so he could get a higher level of NIS benefit? He didn't get the answer. Instead, he got a lash of losing 13,000 pounds. I know a businessman on the Carenage a few years ago. He wanted to go to the Privy Council. So I started with an ordinary Grenadian. Now I'm raising the bar now to a businessman wanted to go to the Privy Council. He had to come up with 100,000 pounds. He weighed it in the balance and said he can't afford that. So at different strata of the society, we know that realistically, as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago said last September, 99% of Trinidadians cannot set foot in the Privy Council. I saw the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda on a video put out a few days ago, and he was making a similar statement about his people in Antigua and Barbuda, saying that about, I think he gave a figure roughly. Anyway, he was making the point that most Antiguans, Barbudans cannot afford to go to the Privy Council. Another thing you will notice is that when a country gets into the CCJ, almost immediately the number of final appeals multiplies. Meaning, in Barbados, before they went into the CCJ, on average per year, if you had 11 appeals going to the Privy Council, that was a lot. Since they're in the CCJ, you get about they've had about 42 appeals already. So if you take the last 10 years of Barbados in the Privy Council and you compare it to the first 10 years of Barbados in the CCJ, it's like chalk and cheese. 11 for the last 10 years in the Privy Council, 40-something for the first 10 years in the CCJ. What's the difference? The CCJ is accessible, it is affordable, it is within our reach. That's how it is.
It's our court.
Our court.
I too, if I may, just want to add with respect to the whole question of access, because my respectful view, this is fundamental to the whole issue. Because if you vote no tomorrow, we remain with the Privy Council, and you're basically voting for something that you do not have access to. If you vote yes, you're voting for a court that is accessible to you. We have to think of the Privy Council and its history in the Caribbean. And my understanding is that the Privy Council, in theory, can be itinerant, but they've only come to the Caribbean once, to the Bahamas, and Dr. Alexis can correct me if I'm wrong. And when they got the bill when the Bahamian government got the bill to host them, they weren't necessarily invited back again, because it's a cost that the people of the Bahamas had to pay, the Bahamian government. We have to contrast this with the CCJ and how it's been functioning since its inauguration. That the CCJ has been accessible to the ordinary man. And we look at this case of Sheldon Myrie, and I've been asked the question of, well, of course we know that in the case of Sheldon Myrie, the incident occurred in Barbados, and the judges of the court understood that she was a woman of very simple means, wasn't from an established family, etc. And she could not afford to go to Trinidad, where the court has its headquarters, to present a case or to have a witnesses travel with her. But it was an important case for the development of the jurisprudence in the region. What did the court do? The court traveled to Jamaica so that she could present her case and the witnesses could present the case. But what is important is that this was not a cost that she had to pay. It was a cost of the court. So it is important to understand that the court can come to your country and to listen to matters, and it's not a cost that the litigant has to bear. Also want to mention with regard to...
Could we hold one moment, because we have a caller on the overseas line.
Good morning and welcome. Good afternoon.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the panel, especially Dr. Alexis. You know, because I follow Dr. Alexis from Canada to Grenada, through the politics to everything. And Dr. Alexis, I don't know if he was in Grenada at the time, from 1970. I guess maybe he was outside studying. As a young man, you know, I listen and I follow all the demonstration, and I always used to hear that word. We want freedom. We want justice. That is something that stick in my head as a young man, fighting for that in my country. And then we end up with forward ever, backward never. You know? Forward to all the Caribbean people. We go out to Africa, you know, Venezuela. We go to Nicaragua, etc. And as a young man, you know, growing up, I follow that principle. We had a revolution. It didn't last long, but it teaches us so much. And Dr. Alexis and your panel, you know, for we to sit back today and hear the sons and daughters of those who died and fought for that freedom, to come and tell us they're not against the CCG, but what they're against is those corrupt lawyers in Grenada and those 3 flights of steps when you have to get in your house, all kind of garbage. You know? And I felt bad in Canada here to sit back and hear, you know, those things coming out of people's mouth who I know, but Devon could even tell you as a young man, who pushed that down with throat. We want freedom. We want justice. We demonstrate from 1970. A lot of people don't even know the Committee of 22. You understand me? We fought for we life. Yes, I mean? And today, we get a chance to have with freedom and with justice. And for these people to go around and telling people, no. Dr. Alexis, I would like to, and your panel to ask them what they want, what they really want. In 2007, after the election, goes up to 2012. If we had won in 2013, today we'd have right there. We'd have right to the People's Council, whatever you want to call it, we'd have been there. We'd have been the Caribbean of Justice. We'd have been there. But why now we say no? It's sad. And I'm listening. Thank you all, guys, and God bless you.
God bless.
Well, thank you very much. That's the point which the NDC Public Relations Officer was making at the lunch down at the Trade Center when he was saying, if you have regard to the history of Grenada, especially in recent times, meaning in particular since 1979, Grenada should have been the first country to be in the Caribbean Court of Justice, as the point he was making so eloquently, and he repeated it. And I saw him on the screen earlier this morning making the same point. Now, it is unfortunate that in some third world countries, some developing countries, some opposition operatives see it as their business to oppose everything and not isolate paramount national issues and keep them away from narrow partisan concerns. Fortunately, Barbados has shown us how to do it. They didn't have to have a referendum, and they didn't. But they needed parliamentary majorities, and both the government and the opposition sat down, reading on the same page, refused to make a political issue out of Barbados getting into the CCJ. They both signed on the dotted line without debate, making the point that the issue of Barbados acceding to the CCJ is of high national interest, not to be contaminated by partisan political posturing. Now, contrast that with, to some extent, what is happening. I say to some extent because I know some of the newcomers to the NDC posturing in front of the party really do not speak the language of the NDC. They just come and they're just posturing. The NDC was engaged in talks with the Attorney General of this country after the bill had already been tabled in Parliament. They were talking about electoral reforms. To tell you the honest truth, I am not getting into that. If they're having their talks, they're having their talks. I never got involved in that. But the most important point is this. While those talks were going on, you never heard any member of the NDC suggesting that there were any flaws in the CCJ bill. And it is obvious that had those talks gone the way the NDC wanted them to go, and I don't really like saying the NDC, I mean that particular figure in the NDC there, you would not have heard any reference to any flaw in the bill. Talk about flaw in the bill emerged only after those talks broke down, which is only about what, 3 weeks ago or so. So for the whole 90 days that the bill was lying on the table in Parliament, you didn't hear that person talking about any flaw in the bill, and the bill would have been presented to the people in the referendum without there being any reference to any flaw, if only the talks had gone a different way. So what do you make of that? Well, what I make of it really is that There's not any question of any flaw in the bill. And in this weekend, that same particular person has revved up the process of trying to find other things. So it's all about a little word, ego, E-G-O. Well, every person is entitled to have an ego. After all, God made all of us different from the one from the other. So every person is entitled to have an ego. The point is, though, when we allow our individual ego to get the better of the general good of the country for generations to come, that is where the difficulty arises. So I agree with you, brother. And I go back to where I started, namely that you had the public relations officer of the NDC at the launch of these exercises making the point to the world that having regard to the history of this country since 1979, Grenada should have been the first to join the Caribbean Court of Justice appellate jurisdiction. And he went on to say he was making that point. If Sheldon can find it and put it up on the screen when I'm through.
Shortly.
Make that point to refute all of the kinds of things, what was his own words, all of the things they are now coming up with. So it would be a good idea if Sheldon could find that and put that up on the screen now.
We'll play it in a short while. We have a caller who's been holding for quite a while on the line.
Good morning and welcome.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Devon and
good afternoon.
Sheldon.
Well, yeah, actually afternoon.
And to your luminaries on the panel.
Hello.
I know it was mentioned briefly this morning, but I have a question. And it's coming from an aged revolutionary and one of the Clinch-Fritz member of the brigade. I marched too. During the period 1979 to 1983, when the PRG pulled out of the Privy Council, what was Grenada's final appellate jurisdiction then? Was it out because of need or because of necessity? What was the final appellate jurisdiction then when Grenada pulled out during that period? Thank you.
When Grenada pulled out of the Privy Council in 1979, I think it was by People's Law 84 of 1979, the final appellate court became the Court of Appeal, not even of the Eastern Caribbean, but the Court of Appeal of Grenada, established by People's Law, I think 9 and 14 of 1979 or thereabouts. So it wasn't as if we even had a regional court as our final court. It was the Court of Appeal established by and for Grenada by the People's Revolutionary Government. I must say that that court had some very impressive figures on it. People like Haynes from Guyana, J.F. Haynes, former Chancellor of Guyana, Dr. Nicholas Liverpool. I think at one stage that Telford Georges would have sat. Yes, I think so too. You had former Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, Neville Peterkin. So Neville Peterkin was on the court for a time too. It was an impressive court. But the point is that if you go back to 1901, as Mr. Branch was taking us just now, when the editorial in the Gleaner of Jamaica newspaper was making the point that it's time for Caribbean countries to get out of the Privy Council, Grenadians were not eating one another in Grenada just because we no longer sent appeals to the Privy Council. But you hear some people talk and you'll swear, if you don't have the Privy Council there, it will be open market in the country. The revolutionary period disproves that. Guyana was not sending appeals to the Privy Council since 1973, so that Guyana was without the Privy Council from 1973 until it got into the CCJ in 2005. So we have had periods in our history in the Caribbean where we were not sending appeals to the Privy. I heard one of the naysayers talking about Eric Williams and how Eric Williams kept Trinidad and Tobago tied to the Privy Council. And I could only sit there and smile, because when Eric Williams took Trinidad and Tobago into independence in 1962, two things. Obviously, there was no Caribbean Court of Justice at the time. And I referred earlier on to all the uncertainty, the anxiety, the worry, indeed the fear that people like Bustamante, Eric Williams, Manley, Forbes Burnham had to deal with. Even Arigeri in 1974 had to deal with. You could not tell the people in any one of these countries at the time that their final court would be the local court. You had to be crazy to do that. So it was no issue about these countries continuing on the Privy Council. Those leaders at the time had no choice. It came automatically. So to come and say that a brilliant scholar, regionalist, nationalist like Eric Williams, and he kept the country tied to the Privy Council, sometimes people, they just talk.
And we have a caller. Good afternoon and welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Sheldon. Good afternoon to your listeners, guests in studio. I have not been able to listen to the program, so I'm not even sure. I know Dr. Alexis for sure is there. Hello?
Go right ahead, caller. We wouldn't be able to talk to you directly, so you could just go right ahead and make your statement.
But we can confirm Dr. Alexis is here.
We can confirm that. We can confirm Dr. Alexis is here, Mr. Robert Branch, and Mrs. Michelle Steele.
I'm hearing Mrs. Steele at least. I'm hearing little bits and pieces.
Okay.
But I'm calling Sheldon this morning just to reinforce and to encourage all of our Grenadian citizens who are out there. I'm sure the panel would have provided sufficient information as to why people should go out and support the CCJ, but I just want to encourage particularly the people of St. Andrew Southeast who are listening to me right now, and I want to further encourage all the people of Grenada who are listening to me right now that they should go out tomorrow, the 6th of November, a very historic day for all of us, and to vote in support of the CCJ. I'm sure you would have had 1,000,001 reasons why you should from the panel here and from all that's been said before. But I just want to reiterate the point that, in my opinion, the CCJ has been specially designed for Caribbean. And so I believe as a people of the Caribbean, as a people of Grenada, this opportunity we should not allow it to pass by. And I say allow it to pass by because I recall what happened in the last referendum. We have this opportunity, let us grab it. Now, in the last referendum, and leading up to the last referendum, I heard the cry of the people of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. We name on the passport. I remember clearly Minister Nimrod advocating in cabinet that we cannot not support this item in a referendum. And so that item was on the referendum. But what happened? The same people who were advocating that the people of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique must have their name on the passport, these were the same people who went out and said to them, vote no in the referendum, vote no for that bill. The referendum came, did not go through, and you hear it again. We're not fair. They should have their name on the passport. The same thing before the election. It is not democratic. Democracy is not complete if you don't have an opposition. The referendum came and we said, okay, let's go, let's vote on that. Let's agree that every time a party wins 15 seats, that there will be a leader of the opposition. The same people who advocated for it, the same people who said democracy would be promoted if we do that, same people went out and say, vote against it. And some people went out and they did. Election came, NNP won 15 seats, and then the same people cry out, this is not good for democracy. You should never have one party having all the seats in Parliament, when they had the opportunity to make sure that right now we would have had a leader of the opposition. The same thing to do with the date of the announcement of date of election. We heard it during the campaign. We don't like the idea. Why not follow the U.S. system that the Prime Minister has to be holding the date in his back pocket and he alone knows? Why everybody cannot know that? And we say, fine, let's vote and let's make that happen. Let's make sure that every Grenadian knows the date of every general election to come. And then the same people who were advocating this, they went out there and they said, vote no. People voted no, election is in the air, campaign is on, and they say, well, why he has to be hiding the date like that? Because we said, no, we don't want to know the date. I'm appealing to Grenadians. Let us not allow this trend to continue. That when we get an opportunity to decide upon the things that we want, that we turn around and say no or vote no or does not support because we are influenced by the confusion in the air. I want to encourage us that the CCJ is in Grenadians' interest, is in the interest of Caribbean people. It is in the interest of justice. Only this morning, a young man, I'm not going to mention his name, you know him very well, has gotten himself over the years in conflict with the law. A couple of days ago, he asked me to explain CCJ, and I did. So this morning, I asked him, well, what's your opinion? What do you think now? And, you know, it was amazing, his response, one of which, you know, he went so far to say to me, well, even the currency, I mean, if you comparing the pounds and the TT dollars, we're far better off, you know, and he's stuck in the economic part of it. So I'm saying for the real man, the man on the block, the Rastafarian, the young man who has gotten himself or may find himself in conflict and may have to find a defense at the highest level, put in a defense at the highest level. The question is, are we going to go there tomorrow and make a decision that's in our best interest, everyone's best interest, or are we going to go there after persons would have allowed us to become confused, not even deciding upon the things that we know that we need? One final thing, Sheldon, I'm going to mention. I had to block an individual from my Facebook page. I've never done this before, and I had to do it yesterday. It's sad when we allow ourselves to be reduced in that way, that we allow every issue to become political and we cannot see important things within issues. And I had to say to that person, you cannot go down to the gutter like this and refer to people who decide that they're going to vote yes as dumb and stupid and poor and things like that. I mean, how do you refer to our people in that way when they are going to support something that they view is in their best interest? I say to us, let us be mindful of the errors we have made in the past, and there may have been many. Let us make sure that we do this right for not just us who are here today, but for those who will come long after. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister. All right. Yeah, we had the Honorable Emlyn Pear. Yeah, saying to the people of St. Andrew, Southeast, and Grenadians on a whole, come on out.
I want to weigh in on one particular thing said by that caller. That the CCJ is designed for the Caribbean. And I want to tie it in a question you put earlier, whether the CCJ is a hanging court. That was said before the court was established. And when the court gave its judgment in Queen and Joseph and Boys from Barbados, the court dispelled forever what is its vision of its role in terms of capital punishment, because the court created history in that case when it ruled that the Mercy Authority in Barbados could not advise the Governor General to issue the death warrant against convicted persons without the petition of the convicted persons being first heard and processed by the relevant international human rights tribunal. And when that judgment was given, and several of the judges wrote their own judgments, even those who previously had been prophesying that this court was going to be a hanging court, they turned around and said that they are satisfied not just by the bottom line decision given in the court, but more importantly, by the reasoning, the philosophy of the court, and they were comfortable with the court. And the court has never turned back from that decision. As a matter of fact, already the CCJ has emerged as a court which is prepared to break new ground in the preservation of justice. Take, for example, a case from Belize. Issue: if a person as a minister has treated with the national goods of the country in a way that suggests that there has been corruption, graft, can the Attorney General bring a civil suit against that former minister? No country in the Commonwealth, no court anywhere in the Commonwealth ever answered that question by saying yes. They have always said you have to bring a criminal prosecution, in which event you have to prove your case beyond reasonable doubt. The CCJ is the first court anywhere in the Commonwealth to answer that question with yes, with the result that you don't have to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt, you prove it on a balance of probability. And I can give you case after case where the CCJ has struck out, breaking new ground if need be, to protect the rights and freedoms of the people. The Shanik Mairi case, for example, that in itself is an earth-breaking case. And I want to tie it into something that the Privy Council is always saying. Not the Attorney General Joseph, not Francis Alexis. The Privy Council speaking for itself. I'm quoting, for example, from the case Baker v.R. 23 WIR 463 at page 468. The Privy Council here is giving a very important explanation as to how it proceeds with cases from the Caribbean. And this is what the Privy Council said. The board is, and I'm quoting now literally, not personally familiar with conditions, end of quote, in the Caribbean. And they use that to explain two things. One, they're saying they're not personally familiar with conditions in the Caribbean. Last caller is talking about a court suited to the needs of the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. Compare her language with the language of the Privy Council. They're both saying the same things from different vantage points. Last caller speaking as a person from the Caribbean, Privy Council speaking as a Privy Council now, and saying that they are remote from the Caribbean, and more importantly, they are not personally familiar with, they were talking about Jamaica, Jamaican conditions, move Jamaica, put Caribbean. Both of them saying the same thing, and the Privy Council is explaining that because, in the language of the last caller, they are not a court suited for the Caribbean, not designed for the Caribbean, they're not familiar with the conditions. On that basis, they are explaining, their lordships always hesitate long before interfering with a judgment from the Caribbean, especially in constitutional law, because they say the judges in the Caribbean know about the conditions of the Caribbean, they know what Caribbean conditions need. We far away across the ocean don't know, so we're not going to put our mouth in your business across there. And that is why you will find for every 20 cases that go from across the entire Caribbean, to the Privy Council. Generally speaking, in not more than 2 out of 20 cases would the Privy Council interfere or reverse a Caribbean court. Let me repeat that statistic for you. In no more than about 2 out of every 20 cases that go to the Privy Council, in no more than 2 would you find the Privy Council reversing a Caribbean judgment. I'm not saying they never do. My statistic is just the opposite. I'm saying they do, but in not more than 2 out of 20 cases. And the same reason given by the caller there, who I presume is not a lawyer, not knowing what the Privy Council is saying, she is saying, look, the CCJ is suited for our conditions. And the Privy Council is saying, look, we in the Privy Council are not suited for your conditions. We don't know your conditions. We're not familiar. So we're not going to interfere. It's amazing. She talking from Grenada, Privy Council saying the same thing.
We lost that caller. Callers, just remember you can call in 440-737. You may have to hold a little bit when you call in, but the phone lines are open. And we know from 6 a.m., polls open at 6 a.m. tomorrow, going until 5 p.m., not going until 6 p.m. Polls close. If you are in the line at 5 p.m., you have to be allowed to cast your ballot. If you get there after the police officers have blocked off, you will not be allowed to cast your ballot, but you have the opportunity between 6 a.m. and 5 p.m. to cast your ballot.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen, and good afternoon to your guests. Well, quick comment here. Dr. Alexis, I am so pro-CCG, even without any information coming from the committee, from your committee. I'm so pro-CCG that sometimes I find it difficult to even try and explain. I try to persuade people, why they should vote in favor. Now, my question to you, Doc. How come lawyers and other people that we see as learned in the public could misread and misinterpret documents that they spend their entire career looking at? How come their opinion is so different from yours? My question to you, Doc, is how learned are these people that share such differences of opinion, despite the fact they read the same document like you? I want you to give me an idea as how do we assess such individuals. Thank you, sir.
You must know that Lucifer came out of heaven. He was right there with God. You could be in the same school and reading the same page, but coming to different conclusions completely. Now you have to remember also that some lawyers are in some political parties and others are in different political parties. And you take, for example, although he's not a lawyer, the fellow who was involved in that video on Friday afternoon, I keep coming back to it because it is a living testimony to us what people can get up to. When he was in the company of the advisory committee, he was getting it right. As soon as talks broke down and he went back across the river where he came from, then things started to go all right, wrong with him again. So it's a question of the company you keep sometimes. It comes right down to that. The company you keep. You're growing up in school in St. Paul's and they tell you bad company can carry you astray and they don't bring you back. So never mind you reading the same book, the same page. The company you keep can affect the way you interpret what you read. Sometimes you get the impression that, and I was listening to somebody talking the other day, yes, in church, Sunday, and Father was saying, there are some people I will never be able to convince them. That struck me, because I was able to relate that to the exchanges going on about CCJ. He wasn't talking about CCJ, don't get me wrong. He was talking about, again, how people interpret things. That's what he was talking about. And he was saying, I guess there's some people I will never be able to convince to my point of view. And I was able to relate to that fully. So at the bottom of the day, I have to say, there are some people I will never be able to convince as to the true interpretation. I was given this example of how Dominica got into the CCJ. Because I'm reading the provision in the Constitution and I'm saying to Dominica, you see that clause there? That clause can get you into the Privy Council. And somebody I'm discussing it with is saying, how come you're reading it that way? I mean, how else can you read it? And to be fair to lawyers, sometimes you read judgments, say, of the U.S. Supreme Court, or of the United Kingdom Supreme Court, or for that matter of the Caribbean Court of Justice. But my best example is from the U.S. Supreme Court, where they are ruling that now, for the first time, man can marry man and woman can marry woman. And look at the strength of the language used by judges who say yes in that court and judges who say no. Read that case to see how people who are very learned in the law, outstanding jurists, can read one provision of the Constitution one way and other jurists can read it another way. So it doesn't worry me. I understand that different people reading the same clause can come to different conclusions, and that's quite understandable. Quite apart from their allegiances, their affiliations, their lineup, they can genuinely come to different conclusions. But when you add to all of that different political persuasions, then you can see how more easy it can be for different lawyers to come to different conclusions.
Yes, indeed. And folks, just a note to those of you out there in the following 3 locations. There have been a change to only 3 polling stations. Everyone else is going to be voting at the same place you voted on March the 13th. There have only been changes to 3 polling stations. They are the following. In St. David, FO1, which usually is at the Pedmota Medical Station, is now at Miss Jane Donald's shop, Jane's shop next door. It's located there. St. George South, LO7, that's usually at the Sandino Block Plant, is now at the Blessed Sacrament Catholic School on Maurice Bishop Highway. And St. George Northwest, or JO2, that's usually at the Lacqua building in Grand Mall. St. George is now at the Seventh-day Adventist Church downstairs. So those are the only 3 that have been changed. Everyone else votes at the same location they voted on March the 13th. We lost that call. Yes, folks, so 4407377, we have roughly about 12 minutes remaining on today's program. Mr. Branch, Mrs. Steele, Dr. Alexis, 12 minutes remaining, and we're giving the information to the Grenadian people. We will want them to know exactly what to expect when they enter that polling station tomorrow as well. What are they going to be seeing? The ballot itself, because some people seem to have been confused by the ballot as well. They've seen the ballot and they seem to be confused by it. Yeah, well, you can take this one.
Yes. Well, we have been circulating a flyer to try and sensitize persons to what they will be seeing on the ballot. And the question that is to be answered is, do you approve the bill for an act proposing to alter the Constitution of Grenada, cited as Constitution of Grenada, Caribbean Court of Justice, and renaming of Supreme Court Amendment Bill 2018? Below that question, there will be an opportunity to tick a box that says yes, or an opportunity to tick a box that says no. A lot of persons have been saying that we are not asked to vote on the CCJ. We are being asked to vote on a bill. But I think it is important to state that for us to alter our Constitution to allow for the CCJ to replace the Privy Council, we must do it by way of a bill that starts in the House of Representatives. Is it introduced in the House of Representatives? It then goes to the Senate, provided it has received the relevant majority. And then it goes to referendum, and that is to the people. So that is why when the House of Representatives sits in the first instance, the question is, do you approve the bill? Each of the parliamentary representatives would have debated on the bill and would have had to weigh in as to their approval of the bill. When it goes to the Senate, in the same way, the senators are debating to vote whether they approve of the bill or not. And in the same way, we the people at referendum stage are being asked, do we approve of the bill? We would have gone through, I think, an extenso, we say in law, but basically we say and we talk about it all which way, that there is nothing in the bill that is sinister, and it deals with two issues. One, do we go to the CCJ instead of the Privy Council? And two, do we rename our court the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and no longer the Supreme Court of Grenada and West Indies Associated States? Our I call him the constitutional guru, the oracle, for the young people, Google, on constitutional questions, Dr. Alexis, he has explained about a preamble, what it means, that the preamble, which is at the beginning of the bill, will explain what is happening within the bill. And that preamble, or sometimes we call it, well, it's an explanation, let's leave it at that, speaks to what is there. Reference to CCJ and reference to renaming of the court.
Let me ask a question here, because I realize a scare tactic has been used where people are being told, well, the bill is 17 pages long, and they keep talking about it 17 pages long. So the average person, they go in and sit down and read the 17 page. The average person, even with the newspaper, they don't go through the entire thing. They read the first few pages, and unless something they're looking for specific, they toss it aside. But is it 17 pages? I mean, because within the 17 pages, they basically talk about the final page, I think, has the signature of the Speaker of the House or something like that. Just a little something with the Speaker, this House signature. There's the preamble to the entire thing. So it's not really 17 pages of information. It's 17 pages long, but it isn't really 17 pages of information that people necessarily need to go deeply into.
Well, apart from that, I want to mention that this process that we're having tomorrow is not fundamentally different. It's not different from the process in 2016, because we had several bills in 2016. This is what we did. When we went to the referendum to vote yes or no, you voted on a bill. And this is what we're doing here. So the bill is the mechanism through which the Constitution is changed. If you look at Section 39, it makes provision for the bill to be introduced in the House of Representatives, then it goes to the Senate, and ultimately there is a referendum in which the people approve the bill. So we should know by now that to change the Constitution in this regard, that it requires the introduction of a bill in the House of Representatives, which we've had. It goes to the Senate. We've had that debate in the Senate, and it is now for the people to approve this in the referendum. And if you look at the bill, of course, it has the preambulatory clauses, and it goes through item by item. Wherever in the Constitution the words Her Majesty in Council or the Privy Council is mentioned, we substitute that for the Caribbean Court of Justice. So this process that we're having tomorrow is not to deceive the population or to deceive the people. Many people have been surprised now and saying, well, all along we're having this debate about the CCJ and the virtues of the CCJ. And do we approve the CCJ? Do we want to move towards the CCJ? And now we're talking about the bill. But this bill went to the House of Representatives. It's been advertised. It's on our Facebook page. It's on the webpage of the Government of Grenada. And this is the process through which the Constitution is changed. So we shouldn't be surprised by this, because we had a referendum in 2016 and it's exactly the same process that we had in 2016. We had several bills then. Tomorrow we're only having one bill with two issues. The first issue is whether Grenada should accede to the CCJ as a final appellate court, and the second issue, should we rename our court? Simply put.
Okay. Any closing statements
Yes.
from each of you as we quickly running out of time?
Let me tell you this. There are two clauses in the bill which capture the essence of each part of the bill. Clause 13 of the bill is the sweeping up clause regarding the CCJ. That is a clause which says, in any law, written law, I'm translating it, other than those specified above, where you see Her Majesty in Council, remove that expression and put CCJ. The equivalent to that clause in the renaming part of the bill is clause 31. And it is doing the same thing as clause 13, only it is doing it in relation to the renaming of the court. It says, and I'm translating it, wherever in any provision in any written law, other than those specified above, where you see a reference to the Supreme Court of Grenada and the West Indies Associated States, or the West Indies Associated States Supreme Court order, delete that and substitute Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court or the Supreme Court order. So really, if the framers were minded, they could have had a bill with only these two clauses, remodeling them. And it is in these two clauses, clause 13 and clause 31, that you see the essence of the bill in relation to each part. So anybody having any problem with the bill, just go straight to clause 13 and to clause 31, where the framer is distilling the essence, putting his or her finger on the pulse of the bill, 13 in relation to the CCJ, and 31, reversing it 13 and 31, in relation to the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. And trust me, if you go to these two clauses, you have the bill, the entire bill. You don't need 17 pages, 16 pages, whatever. Just in these two clauses. And secondly, outside of these two clauses, no institution, whether Parliament, Cabinet, the court, can do anything after referendum day to go outside the ambit of clause 13, CCJ for Privy Council, outside the ambit of clause 31, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court for West Indies Associated Supreme Court. So these two clauses tell you any talk about Parliament using this new act to change anything in the Constitution, and they know it's a joke. They're just being mischievous. There is nothing to fear. There's nothing to hide from in this bill. It is quite innocent. All you're being asked to do, one, put in place of the Privy Council a court which you can access. You can stay at home and file your appeal. You can stay at home and conduct your appeal. And secondly, rename the Supreme Court. That's all this bill is doing. Thank you very much for having us here this morning.
Okay. I don't know if any of the other two guests would like to say anything before they leave.
Well, very quickly, I would like to say, well, thanks a lot for having us here. It's always been a great thing. Well, it's always nice to be here. ccjyesgrenada.org. That's our Facebook page. There are many videos on there with a lot of explanations of the bill. The bill itself is on there. Any last-minute researchers, you can go to that page. Any questions, you can pose them on that page. We have persons that are monitoring the page, so we'll try our best in the next few hours to get answers out to you. Don't let fear be the basis of your vote. I'm always saying to everybody, you vote for me and I'll vote for you. This is a good thing. We don't know when we're going to need it. It's like the dialysis machine. Let us not say, I don't think I need this thing, I don't need to vote. This is something very relevant to us. Let us remember our ancestors and let us follow in the tradition of our ancestors, where we lead as Grenadians and we break the chains to ultimate independence.
Okay, Sheldon, I want to thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion with the Grenadian people and to urge that we support the bill tomorrow. Vote yes. Vote for yourself, your children. Vote for a code that you can access. And vote to continue to break the chain of colonialism. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Before we leave, though, there's a program. The CCG Advisory Committee will be appearing on a program later today.
Yes, we have two programs later today. One on a number of stations, MTV, GC10, GIS,
8 to 10, yeah.
number of radio stations.
That's from 8 to
8
10.
to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And
MTV.
The second part of Beyond the Headlines, I think we'll start at about just before 10 and we will go till about 10:30.
Wow, so a busy evening this evening.
Yes, this is last lap, so throw out all the energy and let's go at it fully.
All right. Folks, that's all the time we have for Hard Talk today. We'd like to thank Dr. Francis Alexis, Mrs. Michelle Steele, who was the first person here as usual, and Mr. Robert Branch, who was the last person here, but that's not usual with him. So we'd like to thank all three of you. We know it's a difficult thing, especially on a day like today, just before the referendum, to take 3 hours out of your schedule. And we know that outside of what you're doing for the advisory committee that you're not receiving a single cent for, that they're not receiving a single cent for, let me repeat it again, that they're not receiving a single cent for, that you're doing there. You do have in the instance of Dr. Alexis and Mrs. Steele, your private practice, and in your instance, Mr. Branch, you are a government employee and you do have a significant amount of work, especially with the referendum taking place tomorrow, to handle. And we'd like to thank you all for taking that time and being here with us and responding to our listeners, letting them know exactly what has been taking place, what they can expect tomorrow, and different parts and bits and pieces about not only the Caribbean Court of Justice, but our history as a people here in Grenada. And I'd like to thank you especially, Dr. Alexis, for going back, dialing back to the 1974 period and before, and letting the Grenadian people know our history. We always try, myself and Devon, always try to put our history first and front and forward when we're doing this program. So we'd like to thank all of the radio stations for staying with us, all of you who have been with us online for the entire period of today. Our technical man in the back, who he doesn't say hi to, but we always have under pressure, Nazim Benjamin. If you see him scratching head in the back, they scratch so much head today, I'm surprised he ain't go bald. But we have him in the back there. So we're going to play for you now, Address to the Nation by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell. We are out of here, in everything you say and do it safe and secure when I'm speaking to and with you.
And not about you.
Yes, indeed. Just programming note, we will not be on with Hard Talk tomorrow. Devon, we ain't coming on. No. Nah, referendum day, we ain't taking a chance. We're not on with Hard Talk tomorrow, but we'll be back on Wednesday, God's willing, with more Hard Talk. We love each and every one of you.
They have been finally exposed.
The following is an address to the nation by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell on Tuesday's national referendum on the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Fellow Grenadians, Cariconians, and Petit Martinicans, patriots. On Tuesday, November 6, we have the opportunity to participate in a significant national endeavor as we vote in a national referendum to make the Caribbean Court of Justice or final court of appeal. The vote transcends any political, social, or religious alliances, for it is about making justice accessible to every Grenadian, Cariconian, and Petit Martinican, no matter their economic or social status or political affiliation. It is about our enduring attempt to develop not merely another society, but one that is fair and just, and one which affords all an equal opportunity for justice at the highest level. This endeavor goes beyond the realm of this present generation. It is indisputably a worthwhile investment in the type of society we'll set up for children and grandchildren's future. It is rather unfortunate, therefore, that as we approach this crucial milestone in our history as a nation, the gravity of the moment is being distorted with misinformation, particularly on social media. I urge all of you citizens not to be swayed by rumors that are intended to sow confusion and doubt. The matter of justice is too important for our society for any of us to try to score cheap political points from the process. By joining the CCJ, we'll also get the opportunity to fix some of the problems that have been identified in the lower courts. After generations of being associated with the Privy Council, none of these problems have been addressed. What we have now is a golden opportunity to bring about real change. The irrefutable fact is that the only real issue on the ballot for Tuesday is whether to keep the Privy Council, which the vast majority of our people don't have the money to access, or to vote for the Caribbean Court of Justice, which will make our final justice less costly and more accessible to all people. There is a saying that justice delayed is justice denied. We are now saying also that justice not accessible is also justice denied. I call, therefore, on all Grenadians, Caraconians and Petit Martinicans, not just as Prime Minister, but as a proud citizen of this country, an important part of the CARICOM family. Let us come together on this issue. Let us stand united with one voice as we vote yes to make the CCJ our final appellate court. Thank you.
The preceding was an address to the nation by Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell on Tuesday's national referendum on the Caribbean Court of Justice.
The NDC and I not opposed to the CCJ.
You know, we should have been the first one signing on to the CCJ. We should have been. I don't know what happened, but given what we did then, we should have been the first. So keep that in the back of your minds with those of you who have all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't.
I am pro-CCJ. I would like to see the CCJ as our final court of appeal.
I am convinced that the CCJ is better for this region than the Privy Council at this point in time. And I am saying it will be better for many, many years to come. So I am simply asking of you to vote yes for the CCJ.
The National Democratic Congress is not and has never been opposed to the CCJ. In fact, previous administrations led by the NDC have done lots of work to push forward the work of the CCJ, and that can be attested to by Brother Peter David. The CCJ is another step towards the achievement of Caribbean unity. And in the NDC, we know that eventually, one way or the other, the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction will become a reality, not only in Grenada, but throughout the Caribbean.
On November 6, 2018, Grenadians will go to the polls to vote in a referendum. The polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 5 p.m. Remember, first check the voters list outside the polling station before seeing the poll clerk, who will enter your name into the poll book. The presiding officer will then instruct you how to vote before issuing you with a folded ballot paper. After voting, remember, the folded ballot paper, how it was given to you, you will then immerse your finger into the electoral ink before placing your ballot into the box. This is a message from the Parliamentary Elections Office.
The Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts present Youth Week 2018, empowering our youth, shaping our community, protecting our future. The week of activities kicks off on Friday, November 9th with the Minister's Address from 8 p.m. Saturday, 10th November, Health Fair, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Cuthbert Peters Park, War, and the Fitness Revolution, 3 p.m. Concord Junction. Sunday, 11th November, it's the Peace Concert, Grenville Brush Terminal. On Tuesday, 13th November, ministers meet with the youth at Her Majesty's Prison. Thursday, 15th November from 5 p.m. It's the Imani Graduation, Youth Awards and Gala. And on Friday, 16th through the weekend, it's the National Youth Service Weekend. Every parish get involved. And on Saturday, 17th November, it's Youth Expo, Explosion Fashion and Cultural Day. 2 p.m. until at Hero Square, Victoria in St. Mark. So remember, Youth Week 2018, November 9th to the 17th.
MP for St. George Northeast angry over video posted on Facebook which claims that he's urging people to vote against the CCJ. Details to this story and more in the National Report. With the National Report for Friday, November 2nd, I am Leslie Ann Johnson. MP for St. George Northeast, the Honourable Tobias Clement, is angry over what he calls an act of desperation by naysayers following the posting of a video on Facebook which alleges that he's urging people to vote no to the CCJ. Mr. Clement spoke with the Government Information Service on Friday evening.
To do something like that at this time is slanderous, is scandalous in that, for instance, to follow my vehicle and put out a video without the audio being played of what is being played and say that I am saying to vote no. I mean, I believe by now the Grenadian people know me very well. And I, for one, will speak openly. And my position is that even in the parliament of our country, I say that the CCJ would bring us to a more independent country. So therefore, I support the CCJ. As a matter of fact, I was out in the field today promoting to our people, talking to people one-on-one in terms of the CCJ. And when this video was released, I mean, I got calls from a lot of people. And at first I kind of dismissed it because what is the talk that you say vote no for CCJ? But this year I could see a lot of desperation. And like I said, the man who put out the video, I believe that it's a final act of desperation, and maybe he do not know it as yet, but he just backed up the wrong tree. I mean, this is Tobias Clement that you're talking about. And if I support something, you would know I support it. And this is what I'm saying about the CCJ. And if I did not support it, you would know it before now. And it makes one angry as to see the length that people would go. But not only that, after this is done and people realize the level of falsity that is in it, they lose respect for you as a person, as a human being. Who can you go to after to tell them or to sell anything? I mean, maybe that is the beginning of the end for the gentleman and for his organization. And I think I will continue to advocate today, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, until it is done so that we can get some change in this country.
Are you contemplating, or is there a need for any sort of action? What can be done in a situation like this?
I do believe that the length that you, because my name was called, I mean in the video my vehicle was shown going around with the PA system on and saying things that I did not say. So I will consult with my lawyers, and necessary action will be taken either before, after, whenever. I think necessary actions will be taken, and the consequence will ensue as to what eventually will happen. But I believe that we ought to, in this country, put an end to these kinds of desperation. There are many ways that you can do things, but to slander someone like that is just not one of them that I will entertain.
All right, so my final question to you, and as you mentioned, you will be talking to your lawyers and all that. Should the individual then own up and say, okay, I am sorry, this is wrong, as you said, it was a desperate act. Would you be willing to let it slide and come to some sort of amicable agreement, or do you think that some sort of lesson should be learned from this so that you would continue with whatever decision that you make?
Well, at this point in time, I almost have to go into damage control because Facebook now is lighted up with this, and hundreds of people are calling me when I should be focused on other things. And for this to be done, probably the backlash that will be felt is that maybe I can dig deeper into it and go out tomorrow again with my people and go out on Sunday again with my people to reassure them that in terms of bringing Grenada into independence is also bringing Grenada in line with the CCJs. And so that is what I will continue to do. I will continue in the next few days to advocate to vote yes for the CCJ and not what this last desperate move by opposition forces.
I think I did say final, but forgive me. So with that done now, and as you say, Facebook is all lit up, how much damage do you think this would do? How much do you think this would sway people, especially those who might not have yet made up their mind and they're hearing this? What do you think this will do?
What they will, I hope that they will see it for what it is. That when you're speaking, you must speak truth. And if you have to lie on something just as simple as that and so blatant as that, then it means therefore that they should see the desperation. And what is it really that I would have to lie for, or they would have to lie for, in order to get a means to an end? After all, at the end of the day, I believe that this is about our country's future, this is about our children's future, and this is about moving forward as a country. Maybe they do not want to move forward, but stay where they are and maybe and see what they can garner out of it. But I do not like the fact that these measures were used. You know what they call real fake news? I mean, that was a desperate act of fake news. And so I believe people will see it for what it truly is and let them be taken to task for it, you know, both on Tuesday coming and in the future to come.
Friday, November 2nd was special polling day where police officers cast their ballots as Grenada votes for a second time to determine whether the Caribbean Court of Justice should become the country's final court of appeal. The voting process on Friday ran from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. and officers voted at the designated polling stations throughout the various constituencies, 4 days ahead of the November 6th referendum. Their ballots will be secured and added to the votes on Tuesday. Mr. Michael Millett is the Systems Administrator at the Parliamentary Elections Office, and he explained what can be expected on the day itself.
All this data would come in real time. It updates, it refreshes, so as soon as polls close at 5, votes are tabulated. Once the votes are tabulated, the presiding officer from there would call in the results to the constituency office, and the results would be put into that electronic system. Charts are going to be changing as the data comes. Each presiding officer in a constituency is going to be phoning in and then carrying the statement of the poll to the constituency office. And at the constituency office, we have data entry persons who are going to be putting in that data there. So even before the presiding officer leaves his or her polling station, that results would already be online.
Mr. Millett was speaking during a press conference on Thursday. This is the National Report. More news after the break.
On November 6, 2018, Grenadians will go to the polls to vote in a referendum. The polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 5 p.m. Remember, first check the voters list outside the polling station before seeing the poll clerk, who will enter your name into the poll book. The presiding officer will then instruct you how to vote before issuing you with a folded ballot paper. After voting, remember to fold the ballot paper how it was given to you. You will then immerse your finger into the electoral ink before placing your ballot into the box. This is a message from the Parliamentary Elections Office.
Continuing the news, a new child development center is in the works for residents in Mount Horn, St. Andrew. We have a report from Delroy Louison, the Public Relations Officer in the Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment.
Parliamentary representative for the St. Andrew Northwest constituency and Minister for Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment, the Honorable Delma Thomas, has come through with a promise to provide a facility to foster the development of children in Mount Horn and surrounding areas. The Mount Horn Child Development Center will be established to provide care and nurturing and will cater for young children ages 6 months to 3 years. The sod turning ceremony was held on Thursday, signaling the start of work on the facility. According to Minister Thomas, the center is expected to change the landscape of the community, since it will be a state-of-the-art edifice, which will also provide employment for a number of individuals. She says government is committed to the safety and well-being of the nation's children.
We are aware of how vulnerable children are and the challenges they will encounter in the early experience if the early experience are not positive. Therefore, we have to do everything in our power to protect them by placing emphasis on the earliest experience. Notably, childhood experiences and exposure have the potential to positively or negatively influence them, their families and their communities.
The project is being funded by India UN Development Partnership Fund, the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, and the Government of Grenada. UNICEF representative for the Eastern Caribbean area, Dr. Alois Kamaragi, pledged UNICEF's continued support to efforts relating to early childhood education in Grenada.
UNICEF is committed to supporting the various processes which are likely to result in positive developmental and educational outcomes for all children and families in the Mount Horn community and the wider Grenadian community.
Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment, Mrs. Veronica Charles, said the well-being of children is of paramount importance to her ministry.
The Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment is proud to be the parent body of child development centers in Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique. The ministry seeks to ensure that quality service is provided to the children as they make their first step towards the education process.
The former Cocoa Association office in Mount Horn will be reconstructed to establish the new state-of-the-art Child Development Center. The proposed period for completion is 6 months. For the National Report, I'm Delroy Louison.
And that's the National Report. I'm Leslie Ann Johnson.
Yeah, man. I say one Caribbean people, so vote yes for our own Caribbean Court of Justice. How you mean? Warm to you like that. Grenada. Don't stand up, babe. We have to vote for CCJ. Don't stand up, babe. CCJ going all the way. Just look at this. Our own Caribbean Court of Justice. Yes, that's good for we. Now we have to spend less money. I take a vote. You take a vote. We take a vote. Vote for Caribbean Justice. He take a vote. She take a vote. They take a vote. Vote for Caribbean Justice. Listen to this. I can't wait for November 6th. We voting yes for the Caribbean Court of Justice. Serious business. Time we come together as one. What? One final court of appeal here in the Caribbean. I take a vote. You take a vote. We take a vote. Vote for Caribbean Justice. He take a vote. She take a vote. They take a vote. Vote for Caribbean Justice. How you mean? We are independent people. And if we are independent, then why can't we make an independent decision like our own Caribbean Court of Justice? I say yes, like that.
The NDC and I not opposed to the CCJ.
You know, we should have been the first one signing on to the CCJ. We should have been. I don't know what happened, but given what we did then, we should have been the first. So keep that in the back of your minds with those of you who have all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't.
I am pro CCJ. I would like to see the CCJ as our final court of appeal.
I am convinced that the CCJ is better for this region than the Privy Council at this point in time. And I am saying it will be better for many, many years to come. So I am simply asking of you to vote yes for the CCJ.
The National Democratic Congress is not and has never been opposed to the CCJ. In fact, previous administrations led by the NDC have done lots of work to push forward the work of the CCJ, and that can be attested to by Brother Peter David. The CCJ is another step towards the achievement of Caribbean unity. And in the NDC, we know that eventually, one way or the other, the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction will become a reality, not only in Grenada, but throughout the Caribbean.
Get up! It's time to vote for Caribbean Court of Justice. Man are ready to vote. The people are ready to vote. I said they're ready to vote. We voting yes for Caribbean Court of Justice. We voting yes, 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 yes for Caribbean Court of Justice. I'm telling you, I go in and vote. You go in and vote. We go in and vote. Caribbean Court of Justice. She go in and vote. He go in and vote. They go in and vote. Caribbean Court of Justice. Grenada is a little island down here in the Caribbean. We've been through a lot in my lifetime, even revolution. And I must mention Hurricane Ivan. My dream is to see all the island come together as one. We voting yes for Caribbean Court of Justice. We voting yes, 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 yes for Caribbean Court of Justice. I'm telling you, I go in and vote. You go in and vote. We go in and vote. Caribbean Court of Justice. She go in and vote. He go in and vote. They go in and vote. Caribbean Court of Justice. My people, remember, November the 6th, Caribbean Court of Justice is the best choice. Vote yes to Caribbean Court of Justice. Up, 2, 3, 4.
On November 6, 2018, Grenadians will go to the polls to vote in a referendum. The polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 5 p.m. Remember, first check the voters list outside the polling station before seeing the poll clerk, who will enter your name into the poll book. The presiding officer will then instruct you how to vote before issuing you with a folded ballot paper. After voting, remember to fold the ballot paper how it was given to you. You will then immerse your finger into the electoral ink before placing your ballot into the box. This is a message from the Parliamentary Elections Office.
The Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts present Youth Week 2018. Empowering our youth, shaping our community, protecting our future. The week of activities kicks off on Friday, November 9th with the Minister's Address from 8 p.m. Saturday, 10th November, Health Fair, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Cuthbert Peters Park War, and the Fitness Revolution, 3 p.m. Concord Junction. Sunday, 11th November, it's the Peace Concert, Grenville Brush Terminal. On Tuesday, 13th November, November, ministers meet with the youth at Her Majesty's Prison. Thursday, 15 November from 5 p.m. It's the Imani graduation, youth awards and gala. And on Friday, 16 through the weekend, it's the National Youth Service Weekend. Every parish get involved. And on Saturday, 17 November, it's Youth Expo, Explosion Fashion and Cultural Day. 2 p.m. until at Hero Square, Victoria in St. Mark. So remember, Youth Week 2018, November 9th to the 17th.
The Caribbean Court of Justice, reaching one unity, coming together as one. Hear what we say. When you see November 6th, we voting yes for the CCJ. Come out and make the right decision. It benefits in everybody. The Caribbean Court of Justice is what I come to promote. So when that time we just stick, make sure you go out and vote, believe it. Let us get it right. I say everything has to fix. One Caribbean, one community. CCJ has to have the remedy. Vote the CCJ, yeah. Come November 6th, every Caribbean island I calling out one and all. Vote the CCJ, yeah.
Yes, for the CCJ. That's it. Vote yes for the CCJ.
Get in there, do road. Get in there, are you getting there? Vote yes, are you ready? Vote X, are you getting? Caribbean Court of Justice is the court for the people. Feeling and need your support. Let me go there and vote. The final court of appeal. We don't have to go England. Let me cut out the express and do it in the Caribbean. I can't wait to go and vote. I can't wait to go and vote. Vote yes, yes, yes. Vote X. I can't wait to go and vote. Boy. I can't wait to go and vote. Vote yes, yes. Vote X. Caribbean justice, Caribbean Court of Justice. 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 November 6th, vote yes for our own Caribbean Court of Justice. Vote yes, yes. Vote X.
Our Grenadian people are proudly Caribbean, and we continually strengthen the bonds of the people of the region. Together, we embrace our collective destiny.
We are the children of Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley, Vivian Richards and David Runner.
As Caribbean as West Indies cricket. As Caribbean as the University of the West Indies.
We are reggae, we are soca, we are one vibration.
Break the chain of colonialism.
Break the chains of colonialism.
The Caribbean Court of Justice. Proudly ours.
The NDC and I not opposed to the CCJ.
You know, we should have been the first one signing on to the CCJ. We should have been. I don't know what happened, but given what we did then, we should have been the first. So keep that in the back of your minds with those of you who have all the excuses in the world as to why we shouldn't.
I am pro CCJ. I would like to see the CCJ as our final court of appeal.
I am convinced that the CCJ is better for this region than the Privy Council at this point in time. And I am saying it will be better for many, many years to come. So I am simply asking of you to vote yes for the CCJ.
The National Democratic Congress is not and has never been opposed to the CCJ. In fact, previous administrations led by the NDC have done lots of work to push forward the work of the CCJ, and that can be attested to by Brother Peter David. The CCJ is another step towards the achievement of Caribbean unity. And in the NDC, we know that eventually, one way or the other, the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction will become a reality, not only in Grenada, but throughout the Caribbean.
The government of Grenada continues to fulfill its mandate to the Grenadian people by creating more and more opportunities.
I love my Grenada, my homeland forever. Sing the chorus louder, tell them about Grenada.
We are focused on building a stronger economy, creating more jobs and a better life for our people. Thus far, we have been making significant progress. Today, Grenada's economy is much stronger and poised to experience its 6th consecutive year of growth. We are experiencing increased economic activities in the construction, tourism, transport, and retail trade sectors. There is massive expansion in private sector activities, and our economy is now the fastest growing in the region. By year end, we are expected to grow by 5.2%.
I love my Grenada, my homeland forever.
Unemployment has dropped significantly from about 42% in 2013 to 21% in 2018, and we are working hard to bring it even lower. We have paid over $100 million to workers, and in just 6 months, we have restored pension to government workers employed between 1983 and 1985, while public workers consistently receive their salary on time. In just 6 months, we have spent over $7 million under the bushing program, and a further $6.6 million is expected to be spent on those ordinary workers by end of year. Additionally, about 800 persons have received direct employment at the constituency level through programs such as the environmental wardens, the housing and community brigades. Over 1,500 young people have been engaged during the month of October through the new Imani program and a special program for young men called Empower. They will receive monthly stipend ranging from $700 to $1,000.
I'm proud, I'm strong. I am a Grenadian.
Only this year, over $45 million has been invested in scholarships for young Grenadians to study in Grenada and universities overseas, while $2.5 million was spent on the school book programs. The government has spent millions of dollars on the school uniform support program through vouchers, and senior citizens are receiving $100 more under the SEED program. Work has already started on over 600 new houses in 5 locations throughout the country. Additionally, $112 million in grant funds has just been secured to make our water sector climate ready, while creating hundreds of new jobs for our people. Millions of dollars will be spent on the St. Patrick Road Development Project and other major infrastructure works, which will start soon throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
Grenada is like holding up the Caribbean Sea. Red, green, and yellow stand for nationality.
As we continue to serve our people, we look forward to the reading of the 2019 budget just weeks away. But as we build on our economic progress, we must ensure that justice is accessible to all Grenadians. That's why we are encouraging you to go out and vote yes for the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Caribbean Court of Justice.
On Tuesday, November 6th, we will be joining our Caribbean brothers and sisters from Antigua to vote for the CCJ. We encourage you to go out and vote. Vote yes for CCJ because it is easy to access. Vote yes for CCJ because it is cheaper. Vote yes for CCJ because it is less than 30 minutes away from Grenada. Vote yes for CCJ because it is our court. Vote CCJ to break our bonds to colonialism. Vote yes to CCJ because justice is guaranteed to all. Vote yes.
Court of Justice. She go in and vote. He go in and vote. They go in and vote. Caribbean Court of Justice.
Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new National Party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405-8683 with your name, email, and constituency. Stay in the know with NNP. Get updated.